verbalize it to me, but I could definitely tell.
To invite my board colleagues to join me at the table so that we can begin our board workshop for March 12th, 2024. And we are super excited to have our first item on the agenda here in the room already set up. I'm just going to quickly go through the workshop agenda for this evening. Of course, we first have our Hopkins High School Robotics Club, the Technocrats, here to present to us their amazing things that they're doing this year. We have a presentation on proposed international travel, an update on our IB program, and then a brief budget update at the end. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed to welcome our exciting first presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Andreessen, and good evening to board members, colleagues, community members, and anyone who is listening in from outside of this space. We're really happy to have our robotics team, really elementary, middle school, and high school, all in one space this evening. It's very exciting, with our head mentor, Jason Herzog, and additional mentors, Kate and John, and students. So we're very excited to hear what you have to share, and then maybe we will take a quick walking field trip to see, what is the name of the robot behind us again?
Wombat.
Wombat. Okay. So I think we might want to see that centerpiece. And so, yes, this is really exciting. I myself have been to Williams Arena a couple of times to see the Technocrats in action, and truly it's magical to see so many teams from high schools across Minnesota, not just competing, but working together, because I think one of the rules of engagement is you help each other solve problems across teams, which is a really fantastic skill for our students to have. So thanks for being here. I'll turn it over to you, Jason, and we'll get started. And maybe just make sure everyone gets to introduce themselves.
Yeah, so thank you, Retta. So as you said, my name is Jason Herzog. I'm a head coach, lead mentor of the high school team, the Technocrats at Hopkins High School, and also an alum of the team and of Hopkins as well. And with me today, as you mentioned, we've got John, who's a mentor on the team, Kate, who's a parent and a mentor on one of the elementary school teams, and then Nathan Cruz, sorry, who is a junior and one of the captains of the team, and then Isra Ugas, who's one of the other captain of the team and a senior, and this is your third year, yeah, and then Jackson Craven, who is a senior as well and the lead of the business side of the team, and then Rosebeth, who is a member of the one of the elementary school teams, the Sun Kittens, yes, and has been a longtime supporter of the high school team. So yeah, so we've got quite a bit to go through today to cover kind of what's going on with the team, robotics in general at Hopkins, and how it relates to Vision 2031 and the other activities that the district is working through and working on. Right, and then a few requests of the board of how we can get additional support, and then other opportunities to engage with the team. So we're just going to start right off with the main point, right? So the robotics program at Hopkins, which comprises all the way from elementary school through high school students, is preparing scholars for success after graduation, and we feel it's a really good fit for with Vision 2031 and the traits of a scholar that we're expecting our students to graduate with, right? And so there are a few ways that we're looking for some additional support to grow the program and to reach more community members across the district. So we'll cruise through these and you can peruse them at a later time. But basically we went through and looked at all of the traits of a Hopkins scholar when they graduate and some of the explanation of those and talked about how students on the technocrats are demonstrating those traits and building those traits within themselves, right? So specifically for critical thinking, as we look at, this is one we use extensively on the team in terms of evaluating what the team should be doing, not just with the robot, but with our engagement with the community, and how we decide which activities we're going to proceed with. I think one of the unique aspects of especially the high school team at high school robotics program is the global nature. So as Rhoda pointed out, right, when we compete, we have our team paired up with 2 other teams at random for each match. So every single match, we're collaborating with other teams to evaluate our strategy for that match and how we're going to play. And then as we move into the playoff section of our competitions, we have to either pick our alliance partners, pick our teammates, or be picked, right? And figure out how to negotiate and develop a strategy that's mutually beneficial. And one of the large aspects of our competition in general is that there is an opportunity for teams to travel outside of our own state area. So we routinely compete with teams from neighboring states. There's a team from the Czech Republic that always visits to the Minneapolis competition where we'll be at, and we compete with and against them and have to communicate and evaluate how we operate. A couple years ago, we were able to compete at the World's Competition, World Championship in Houston, Texas, which involved teams from Israel, Turkey, China, Australia, Brazil, and we competed with and against those teams, and students had the opportunity to, on their own, communicate and collaborate with them to determine the best routes of competing on the field and working together. So as we continue to go through some of these, we broke down how this looks like on the team, and we feel that Vision 2031 is a great fit for how our team operates and the traits and development that we're trying to instill in students as we teach them about building robots, but more than that, teach them about how to operate in a large team, right? On a large project that extends from January 6th this year is when we found out our competition. We had our first competition a week and a half ago where we competed, and we have another one coming up in 3.5 weeks, right? So much longer than any school project that you get as an assignment, right? Our team comprises 23 students this year, right? Which is essentially an entire class working on one project collaboratively for an entire semester, right? And so the scope and scale of the projects is quite a bit larger than what students are exposed to within their academic curriculum. So, and I think one of the unique aspects of our team, even compared to other robotics teams, is the team culture, right? And it's probably one of the greatest strengths that our team has in terms of how the students treat each other and how welcoming and inclusive they are of new students, right? And so every year I'm pleasantly surprised by how many students come to the team and do not know anyone else on the team, right? And stick around to learn about robots or about making a business plan or any of the other variety of things that the team works on and participates in, right? And they utilize that opportunity to meet each other and create new friends, but also just that we're touching a large section of the school population, right? Not just a subsection that already knows each other, but really getting our roots deep across the entire school district. So our team has gone through a resurgence lately, but we have been building progressively larger and larger, especially post 2020, right? Making some additional strides in terms of more students, larger reach of activities. But we wanted to highlight what this could look like in other districts. So this team, for example, is from Australia. And
you can help a team build a robot. Help 10 teams build a robot.
thank you.
Help teams in every continent. Well, maybe not Antarctica. If you support girls in STEM, connect girls around the world. Break that glass ceiling. Shatter it. If You can use your phone. Create a Google Hangout. Use that Hangout to assist teams from around the world. Get other teams on board. Do it 24/7. If you can program a Lego robot, you can run a robot, run a small business, make enough money to run a team, franchising. If you can mentor a kid, mentor a school in your neighborhood, mentor a school in a foreign country, create a space to mentor. There's one team in your area. Start an off-season event. Grow it. Start a regional. Heck, start two. If you can inspire your team, inspire a community. What? Too easy? Inspire 200 towns. Inspire others to pick up the cause.
Start a team for homeless teens in the inner city. Be a role model.
Yeah, you go, Steve. If you can build a robot, you can do more. You can innovate. You can improve. We can inspire the world.
The point is our team is growing and going through its adolescence at this point, but there's quite a bit of room to grow, right? So this team, for example, from Australia, right, started a number of other high school teams and elementary school and middle school teams, and even brought competitions to Australia for the first time, right? And so there's the ceiling is much higher than any other school activity, right? So as we look at the robotics program at Hopkins today, we have 85 scholars on teams across elementary school, middle school, and high school, ranging from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Every grade is represented. At this point, we have all the schools, secondary schools represented. However, when we look at elementary schools, we're isolated to Meadowbrook and Glen Lake at this point. And so there's a lot of opportunity to bring that to other areas. And part of that is just word of mouth growth, right? So Kate has been running a team at Meadowbrook for a number of years, and so she's primarily been the recruiter of additional parents to coach teams. So Meadowbrook is a natural growing point at this point. However, there's a lot of opportunity to move beyond that, and we've been working with community ed to facilitate these teams. So community ed handles the registration and the funds and the fees, right? And then the high school team handles helping recruit the parent coaches and then helping train them in to have that role of coaching a team. So we've got a rough 3-year plan that we're trying to tackle, which we want to have our teams even better reflect the student body at all levels. And so we're making great strides in that area, and we do quite well, but there's always a mismatch across teams between the team and the student body. And then we're looking to expand to have multiple teams in each school. And with that, we're expecting to have about 200 participants in any given year on a team in 3 years from now, right? And one of the big things we see is that right now almost all the teams are on wait lists except for the high school team, right? And so we're restricted by the number of coaches that we can find. And so it really comes down to a first come, first serve for registration, which is not the most equitable system for registration in our district. So. And then the high school team has goals of making regular appearances at playoffs and qualifying again for the World Championships. So, Esther, do you want to talk a little more about our team?
Yeah, so on our team, we have 23 scholars and 11 professional mentors. But during the year, we do a lot more than just the robot. So our typical build season runs from the beginning of January to maybe the end of April. But throughout the year, we're doing all sorts of things. In the summers for the past few years, we've had programming training, and this year we recently expanded to include CAD. which is a computer-aided design to teach students the necessary skills for when they come onto the team. But we also do some outreach stuff, like at the Raspberry Festival, where we repped our team, showed off our robot, and it's very useful because we get to meet new people, new mentors, and new students, and talk to people at other levels, so interested parents as well.
And then Jackson, you might touch on.
Yeah. So last summer, we kind of came together as a team and assessed who we wanted to be and what our core values were. And one thing we got out of that was that we wanted to give back to our immediate community, like the Hopkins district. So I have, as the business lead, I've been organizing some outreach events in elementary school classrooms around the district with the team. So I'll give you a basic rundown. What we'll do is we'll bring in this Lego League robot because these are first through third graders that we're usually targeting, so they are primed to join Lego League. So we'll split them in half, and then we put an arm, or we have one half of the class design an arm for the robot so they can, do whatever they want. They go really crazy, and it usually ends up breaking. And then the other half of the class will kind of design a fort out of these cups, and then they'll try to protect this guy. And the goal for the robot team is to knock down the other team's fort. The goal of the fort team is to make a strong enough fort to survive the robot. And through that, we try to kind of teach the engineering design process, kind of part of STEM. So retrospectively, looking back, so when they're designing the robot, I will usually not say anything. I'll just let them do whatever they want. But then when the test starts, so when we have the robot team try to knock down the cup team, I'll tell them to look at strengths and weaknesses of both the tower and the robot, because then we switch the teams, so they have an opportunity to use that knowledge to kind of iterate on the previous team's successes and failures. And they have a lot of fun with that. We've seen some great success of teachers and principals emailing us, the kids were so excited, and we've had a lot of, we do a survey at the end of our little activity, and we ask, who would be interested in joining Lego League after this experience, and we get 80% hands, and some of those hands obviously are gonna be, they're just raising it for funsies, but but I really do think, and we started handing out little information pamphlets for them to give to their parents so that the parents can actually take action, because the kids don't really have the power to join. And at the end, we'll just give them information, because there's a ton of different resources like summer camps, middle school team, Lego League team. So we really try to get them to that next step of robotics.
Thanks, Jackson. And one of the reasons we're targeting first through third graders is the research shows that about fourth through fifth grade is when the implicit biases of who is normally seen in STEM start to set in. And so by targeting before that, we're proactively attempting to work against those implicit biases.
Yeah, that's great.
Nathan, you can talk about this year's robot?
So, hi, I'm Nathan. This year's robot, as you can see on the image there. His name's Wombat. Each year we build a new robot. This year was 102 pounds. It was born in 28 days.
Nathan, do you think we should just walk over and you just explain it here?
Yeah.
Sure,
Let's
that would
do
work.
that. Okay.
And then you can move around.
Sure.
But without the mic, they won't be able to hear on the live.
Oh, Nathan, do you mind?
Is there can
Sure.
demonstrate?
Sure. Yeah, let's see if I can just this around like this so I can see. Let's talk to them like that. All right. So this is our robot here, as you can see right there. It's about 2 feet tall when it's fully collapsed, 102 pounds. Its frame perimeter without the bumpers is 24 inches by 30 inches. And it went to Duluth recently for our most recent competition. And we're enhancing it, adding additions to it, iterating so it can perform even better at our Minneapolis competition coming up.
What did you all add the other night on Saturday?
The other night, we actually added a sensor that is able to tell when something breaks its, when something passes by it, so we know if when the note, which is the game piece, the orange ring there, is in our end effector, which is the piece at the end of the arm. This entire thing can move up and down on the arm, on the pivot, as you can see there. So it can go up and down. The climb is currently up, but it can go up and down and score the notes in different places. And the way we accomplish making this robot in 28 days is we utilize a lot of high-level techniques used by a lot of businesses, such as having a separate design team that is purely focusing on designing the robot, CADing it out, making it in our CAD program, and then making engineering drawings to give to the manufacturing team so that they're able to streamline the process from design to building, which is what a lot of companies use. So we're not only teaching kids STEM, but we're also training them to be for their future and if they decide to go into an engineering field. So yeah, you guys have any questions about it?
If we have questions, you want to just repeat the question?
Yeah, I'll repeat it here.
Okay, so my question is, so the separate design team are technocrats, right?
Mm-hmm. So she asked if the separate design team was still part of the technocrats, and yes, we use a system where we have multiple sub-teams broken up and led by our students, so that we give each of our students an opportunity, if they desire, to get experience in leadership. This year we split up into one automation team focused on programming, sensors, and anything else like camera vision, stuff like that we can do without the robot. And then we split into two other major mechanism teams that were focused on manufacturing the parts when they were given to them by the design team. And then our final one was the business team, which was led by Jackson here. And it was focused on outreach, business plan, our brand as a team, and improving our relationships with places around and just our presence as a team.
What does Wombat do?
So the question was, what does Wombat do? And that's a great question. So every year, there's a new game in this program. So the game this year was taking those notes, the orange notes, and you could either put them in an amp, which is, this whole game was music themed this year. It's called Crescendo. So you could put this in a note, in like an amp, which is a slot that the note could fit into, and there was also a vertical slot and a different part of the field where you could shoot the note into. And the idea of the game was to work with your teammates to get as much points as possible. But another interesting this year was that an interesting thing this year was they added a cooperation point, which is a first like invented word, which is like, you know, working with your opponents for even though you're going against them, because you might be with them later. But it's so that you could score a note in the amp, and then a human player could press a button that would put it into a cooperation point, and if both teams did it, it would lower the amount you needed to get a ranking point. So it could help both teams win, which is interesting that I've never seen in any other sport before, where you could do something that directly helps your opponent win, which is really interesting and a unique thing about this program. Oh, yeah, and also the other thing is the big hook in the middle there. It's supposed to look like the ear of a wombat, but we have to climb on a chain. It's called the stage, but there's 3 chains that are that hang down a little bit, and you have to climb on them. And if you climb with other robots, you get more points.
Wait, so it climbs up a chain?
A chain dangling.
Oh my gosh, were you so nervous to have it up there? I would have been like...
Yeah, they were asking about like climbing, and this robot has to climb on a chain, and it is nerve-wracking every year to see it climb, because there's often a climbing thing in every game. 2 years ago, we had to climb on monkey bars, and actually in one of our matches it fell, which was terrifying, but it's one of the things that happens, and we were able to repair it, and it worked fine. But it is a really, really cool thing to watch an 100-pound robot lift up on a chain, and especially in previous years, go up to 7 feet in the air. So, really, really cool.
Are you allowed to do automation with it? Like, could you do
Yeah.
hey, if you see the orange, do something, or is it all human?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. I was asked if this robot does any autonomous or like automation things, and yes, actually, that's at the beginning of the game of a match. You have to have your robot. It's 15 seconds, and your robot has to do pre-programmed things. Like it can do things like sense stuff visually with cameras, noticing like different coloration. Or like breakage of like a beam, and act on it. But there's no human control directly. So you have basically to have your robot do an autonomous program directly. It's a really, really cool aspect of it, and it allows people who really shine in programming to show their skills and to challenge them. But for the rest of the game, for the rest of the match, it is purely human controlled, with having a driver and an operator controlling the robot to do what they want it to do. Well, that's a great question. I was asked, where do we source our materials? So we do it from a variety of sources. One of our main companies we buy from is AndyMark. They have a lot of high quality parts that we buy from. That's where we get a lot of our gears, our sprockets, our chains. And then there's other companies like Rev, where we get our motors from, as well as our gearboxes for the motors and a lot of other things. We buy from a variety of companies. A lot of these companies are catered purely towards FIRST. Since it's such a large program now, it's been going on for over 20 years, nearing on 30 now. And so a lot of companies have picked up on that and try to provide a more accessible way for FIRST teams to get materials. Any other questions? All right, perfect.
All right. Nathan did a wonderful job of explaining the game, so I'll skip past the video. So beyond the high school team, we have, as showed on the early slide, we have two middle school teams this year. We had one last year. Each of these has 10 students and a long wait list for both teams, filled up very quickly. They actually played each other in the finals of their event, which was a 32-team event, roughly. And so the Technonauts beat the Midnight Snackers in a best 2 of 3 finals match with their other alliance partners from other school districts in the area to win the event. And they're both pictured here. And then on the elementary school side, we have quite a few more teams, and these we keep them to 6 students, which we've learned from a few years of experience. 6 is the correct number, no more. And so we have, Kate can talk a little bit about LEGO League Challenge.
The LEGO League Challenge is all autonomous, so we build a robot that operates autonomously and moves across a game board to score points. Rosebeth's got our robot Phil there, and she'll run one of the programs. I really appreciate how the FIRST curriculum is set up to teach engineering and design concepts like, design, build, test, iterate, and a lot of other important core values of working together. We are always have more people interested than coaches. So over the last few years, we've tried to have some periodic meetings to let parents know what it's like to coach and try to encourage more people to get involved in coaching. So that's our real focus, is getting more parent coaches so that we can have more people get to experience this really neat program. Our team is called the Sun Kittens, and we went to a competition where we won the Core Values Award, so we were really excited by that. And there's several other teams that we're at the LEGO League Challenge level. That's the one with the autonomous program, moves around game board. At the LEGO League Explore level, they build a functioning and moving stationary structure that solves some kind of problems, and that's for children kindergarten through 3rd grade. So I think it's a really neat program. I also have a son who was a member of the Technocrats when he was in high school. He's now a computer science major at the University of Minnesota, and he learned so much being able to work with mechanical engineers like Jason, robotics engineers like John, software developers. It really was a big jump start for him in learning about careers in technology.
I'm gonna run the program.
So the robot, we would program it to sense different structures on the board and then go and interact with the game pieces to score points by moving those models.
And Jackson can be seen here in the bottom of the picture as he mentored the Sun Kittens. So we really encourage the high schoolers to go and help out with the younger student teams and get that experience of one, being a mentor to the younger students, and then two, get the younger students excited. So we've got a few upcoming events, particularly our open house on Saturday, noon to 2, that we'd love to see you at. And then as Rhoda mentioned, we have a competition at the University of Minnesota the weekend after Easter that we will be there, which is during spring break. So our competitions are 3 days long, usually about 12 hours a day. So. All right, so we'll wrap this up pretty quick here. We'll get to the fun part of what we would like to see, or how the school board can help us. So when we talk amongst other teams, we found that a lot of teams are receiving funding from their district that covers some of the costs. So in a normal year, we spend about $25,000 that the team has fundraised either through student fees, which is very limited in terms of its overall budget, but primarily through corporate donations, and fundraising events. So raising that $25,000 takes a large amount of our time and efforts. And a lot of that goes towards travel expenses to keep it reduced costs for the students, and then also registration fees for the competition, right, to cover some amount of parts we get, and the large scale of the events that we attend require a large fee. And so all in all of that $25,000, we probably spend about $7,500 on actual robot parts and tools, and a lot of those tools are shared with the tech ed department as well, and we make use of what they have, and they make use of what we have. Some other ways that we would be helped is grant writing support. So there's quite a bit in terms of grants out there available. Grant writing is something we've dabbled in and attempted. I wouldn't say that we've been extremely successful in, right? And so someone with some past experience or some successes could go a long ways towards helping us apply for grants that are not just for our team, but for our tech ed program at the high school as well. And some of these grants can be quite large in size. And then Community Ed has been a great partner for us in terms of helping execute these elementary school and middle school teams. But it's a extra additional time that they're putting in on top of their other workload, right? And so finding some way to hire someone on a stipend to help coordinate all of these teams, especially as we look to grow to 200 participants across the district, would go a long ways, right? And this could be in the form of an assistant coach at the high school team, right, that is paid, or it could go in the form of additional money to Community Ed to support them spending time on these activities, to coordinate finding the parent coaches, getting them registered, getting background checks done, getting teams set up and scheduled and whatnot. So in years where, like 2 years ago, where we went to World Championships, that budget for the year, that cost for the year balloons even higher, right, above 40,000. We are, for a team that attends 2 events and travels to one of them, we're on the low side for total budget in a year. There are teams that we play with that have budgets well beyond $50,000 a year, or there are teams out there that have budgets beyond $100,000 a year that because of their team size or the travel that they compete. So here's some examples just from within Minnesota of what we're seeing in terms of support from districts. Coach stipends have become pretty standard, and that's something that Hopkins has adopted in recent years. Right, so as head coach, I receive a stipend similar to a head coach of any other sport, but many districts are supplying additional money. Some of them, it's a combination of for their high school team and their elementary school or middle school teams. Some of them, it's focused just on their high school team. So, and then we have contact information for anyone who's interested in contacting us, especially to coach a elementary school or middle school team. We're always looking for additional coaches, whether it be parents or community members. So, So thank you for taking the time. I know we ran a little bit long, but I appreciate it. Are there any questions, comments, statements of concern?
Any questions or comments?
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
I do have a question. Have you talked with the Hopkins Education Foundation for any funding that they might be able to provide?
Yeah, so the Hopkins Education Foundation has been a strong supporter and routinely provides funding. They provided some funding this year for the middle school teams that is covering additional materials for growing to more teams next year and for a practice field for this year. So they're perennial sponsors at this point. But we're seeing that many districts are receiving funding, or many schools, teams are receiving funding from their district in addition to an education foundation if they have one.
Anyone else? Comments or questions? Well, I want to thank you for being here with us this evening. And just personally, I love this program. One of my kids was in it in the Lego League many years ago, and it is amazing the way in which it supports the whole development of a child. I'm really happy to see how it's taken off in Hopkins, and thank you for being here. I really hope that we can open it up to more families and more students in the district. Thank you. And good luck.
ISTRA's got a few things that we give away at our competitions to other teams. So some bracelets that include our core values that we developed as a team, and some pins for this year's logo for our robot. So
cool.
we'll share those around.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. You did a great job. Thank you.
Do you ever need cheerleaders? Like,
Yes.
I would love to come do that.
Yeah, so
Like mini pom-poms.
so all of our events are free and open to the public. So first requires that you do not charge to attend any of our events. And so like the competition at Minneapolis, we have lots of families visit, especially from the younger teams that bring their students. So it's always a great opportunity.
If somebody does want to volunteer, are there, what do you look for in a coach?
So cute.
Willingness?
Okay.
They all have different.
So we don't have to be an engineer to do it?
No, that's a common misconception.
Oh, okay.
So willingness, and then reach out to myself and or the team, and we'll work through there.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks for
John.
bringing
Thank
the
you, Kate.
robots. That made it really great.
I want to see the wombat climb the side of the building.
I should have the wombat at the whole art workshop.
Seriously, can we do a walking field trip during a read?
Do you all have the wombat one? Do you all have this one?
We define success.
Start wearing that instead of yours.
Wait, 2039, 2239.
My
Oh, it's
bracelet says approachable
their
and confident.
machine number.
What does yours say?
Mine says diverse support.
Diverse supports.
And specialized.
What does yours say, Kai?
Iterate and grow.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Oh, gee whiz.
Now we get to talk about international travel. Is that it?
Is there a field trip?
I got the lowest chair.
Do we get to go? Will there be robots involved? Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hi. Okay.
Well, welcome to the board table. Our next agenda item is international travel. So I'd like to introduce our high school principal, Principal Ballard, our director of IDL, Innovation Design and Learning, Ann Erdl, Rushi Shang, Jen Heimlich, teacher at Hopkins High School, and two students. You'll have to help all of us know your names. I apologize that I don't know your name. What are your names?
Hi, I'm Leighton Black. I'm a senior in high school.
Awesome.
I am Simon Bierkedvet. I'm also a senior.
Thank you for being here. So in Hopkins, our aim is to cultivate students who become scholars over their 13 years of being in our system, and we aim to build scholars who are globally minded and even well-traveled. So this team is at the board table tonight to talk about international travel. We have trips coming up to Costa Rica, Ghana, and China and hopefully lots more in the future. But welcome, and we'll let you take over.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Nice to be here with you. Rushi is going to provide just an overview of why international and global experiences are so important for our students, and just provide a little bit of context, and then we're very excited to hear specifics about the Ghana trip. Go ahead.
Good evening, 晚上好, everyone. My name is Roshi Song, and I'm an IDL team member, and it's my pleasure to be here and share at Hopkins with the input from our educators and community members. So we have articulated 6 scholar traits, as you can see on the slides. To nurture and cultivate these traits, we employ 2 primary approaches. The first one is to innovative course design and experiential learning through partnerships and collaboration. Today, our focus will be on how the trait of being global and well-traveled is supported by the latter approach, experiential learning trips. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's take a moment. Let's take a moment to review the shared beliefs underpinning the trait of being global and well-traveled. Personally, I have found myself visiting these beliefs frequently as they guide our approach to designing the impactful experiential learning trips. Please read the slide when you're done. Give me some up so we can move on. Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. So along with our students becoming global and well-traveled, they are cultivated to be multilingual and culturally agile. They are becoming change makers and being able to engage with local and global communities. Thanks to the dedication of our educators, Jane, just like you, we have been able to offer numerous experiential learning trips. Well, there are too many to name individually. I will provide a brief overview of some examples. Locally, we offer field trips and even operate a designated mini school bus known as Lake Go to facilitate the learning experience beyond the confines of the classrooms. Additionally, we have established partnerships with institutions such as St. Cloud's University, Don Bosco, and the Amity Institute. These partnerships allow us to send students on both domestic and international trips, while also welcoming visiting guests and international intern teachers into our schools and classroom. So it's kind of like a two-way model. We either send our students to see the world, or we bring the world into our classrooms. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, our goal is to establish a more systematic infrastructure to ensure that experiential learning trips are accessible to all students and easier for our educators to coordinate. Achieving these goals will require fundraising efforts focused on supporting the traits of being global and well-traveled, as well as streamlining process and the infrastructure. In addition to these objects, as you can see on the slides, we have some areas I marked it with purple color. We aim to intentionally coordinate the course design and the partnerships to maximize the impact of the overall learning experience for our kids. This included expanding our offerings to include trips at the local, state, national, and international levels, as well as exploring virtual trips opportunities. By providing this diverse trip experience, we aim to empower our students to engage with both local and global communities. Our goal is to foster their development as thriving, multilingual, culturally agile change makers, equip them with the skills and perspectives needed to make meaningful contributions to society. Next slide, please. Speaking of that, we have some exciting upcoming trips to share this spring and summer. Many of our secondary students will be on their experiential learning trips to Costa Rica, to China, and to Ghana. And you can see the little blue pin is where we are in Hopkins. And the other 3 are where they will be. So let's welcome Mrs. Hamlick and her high school students to share more about their exciting trip to Ghana. And thank you for all you do.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Jennifer Heimlich. I teach social studies, AP World History, AP African American Studies, Ethnic Studies, and AVID at the high school. And I started leading these trips kind of by accident. We were stuck at home during the polar vortex many years ago at the end of winter break. And I was sitting at the dining room table and I'm like, I want to go somewhere. And I called up my friend Maggie Temple, another social studies teacher, and I said, you want to go somewhere? We're like, yeah, let's do it. And we just dove in, and I researched tour companies, and I had traveled before with one tour company that I wasn't happy with, and so I found another one after a lot of research that seemed to meet all of our needs. It was reasonably priced, they were very flexible, they were responsive, which I had not experienced with the previous tour company. So we planned our first trip to Spain and Morocco many years ago, and because we wanted to go to Spain and Morocco. That's kind of how we choose our trips. And also, of course, the educational value. It was AP World History, so they learn a lot about all different parts of the world. And we took our first trip, and I've been doing it ever since. This spring will be my 8th trip. We're going to London, Paris, Florence, and Rome in 2 weeks. I have 40 kids going this time. It's the biggest group ever. I thought you guys were big with 39. We've got one more kid this year. Anyway, it's been fantastic. And honestly, I gave you a little blurb about why I lead student tours. If you could go back to the last slide, that would be awesome. I think it really changes people's lives to experience other parts of the world. I think of myself, and the first time I left the country, I went to Cuba by myself, and it changed my life completely. I thought I knew how to speak Spanish before I went there, and I found out I wasn't very fluent in Spanish once I got there. Anyway, so I think about how it changed my life, and every time I travel with students, I see them blossom. My daughter was a junior in high school the year we took our first trip, and she went with us to Spain and Morocco, and she has become a fearless traveler. My son went with us a few years later when we went all over the place. We went like 5 different places that year, and he will get a plane ticket and go at the drop of a hat. I've talked to many former students who are in college and beyond now, and they studied abroad. They can't wait to come back and tell me where they studied abroad and where they're traveling to and all of the things. So I really think it opens things up for students. And I think traveling with us, with their teachers, because I take other teachers as chaperones, and not parents, and I made a conscious choice to do it that way because I like to take teachers that either teach the same class or teach complementary classes or teach maybe a grade level ahead so they know the students the next year. I also take them on spring break because then we still have them in class when we get back. I've never had any misbehavior on the trip. They really hold themselves accountable because, hey, I have to show up in Heimlich's class on Monday, so it just makes everything good. And I think the fact that they travel with us is a step in between traveling maybe with their family and traveling by themselves or with friends. And I really think this is kind of a stepping stone. And our trips, they do get free time to go off on their own and do some exploration. And I think it's a great opportunity. So now we can go to the next one. So this year, like I said, I'm leading my 7th trip this year. Ghana will be the 8th trip next year. In the past, social studies has led other trips, as have other departments. The music department, of course, is going to Costa Rica. They do a great job going all over the place. One year, a long time ago, the art department did a trip every summer. They did one a couple years ago. I know Bethany did. The math department did a trip a couple years ago. And I know world languages have historically done trips as well. People kind of independently plan them, and I think that's one of the things you had on your slide is And I think that's one thing Ms. Ballard and I have talked about, is kind of bringing everybody together in the school who plans trips and start to make a repository of information. And I know Mr. Babine-Dinnan and I have started composing a document, because I'm handing off kind of the European travel trips to him now, as I'm embracing the Ghana trip. So I've started to make a document, like, here's all the things I do and when I do them, and all the things you need to collect from kids and families and parent meetings. We just had a parent meeting last Thursday for both the Ghana trip and his Croatia and Venice trip next year.
And I'd like to add, as a result of some of that work that's being done, the energy around trips at the high school is starting to grow. We have some more teachers that will be taking trips this year, which we're very excited about.
Yeah, and I think once we create kind of that file or that document or that whatever we create with all the steps, it'll be just like a, well, not quite like a field trip, but kind of like a field trip. And I take my kids on field trips too. I just went to George Floyd Square last Friday with my ethnic studies class. And it's easy because I go to the main office, I get the papers I need, I fill them out, I turn them in. You know, we can make international travel so much easier. And now we have this history with this tour company who really knows our students, knows our kids, they're really responsive. I was just on the phone with them this afternoon, and yeah, I think we can make this easier for more people in our school to lead tours and not have it be so daunting. I remember the first time I did it, I had no idea how much of the burden the tour director, who's with us 24/7, remember ours last year? He was awesome. They have very charismatic tour directors. But he was with us 24/7, and I didn't realize what that would be like the first time I did it, and I thought I had to be kind of on and responsible for every single detail all the time. And I remember I was covered in hives. The day before we left for the trip, I'm like, I'm never gonna make it. And once I got there, I realized how much of a shared thing it is, and how over the years I've cultivated fabulous chaperones, and how much we all work together to make it work, and it really seems to work. So, okay, the next slide, if you would. Okay, so this is a video that one of our students made last year. Do you guys want to tell us more about the video? You know more.
Yeah,
about
I
it
can.
than do.
So me and another student named Levi Black, we're both camera guys, and we had our camera with us, and we kind of took all our footage, and he edited a big video from all of the stuff that we took in Spain and Portugal.
So you started out with what, like well over an hour? Like
Oh
2
yeah,
hours?
I think there's an unedited version that's probably an hour and a half long. Just
I've watched the
raw,
whole
just
thing.
raw
It's amazing.
footage. Yeah, so it's the whole trip.
And then there's like the 13-minute
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and
so
then
that-
there's this one.
Yeah, so he just made this one for this event.
Imagine a world beyond textbooks, beyond classrooms, where the vibrant sights, sounds, and flavors come alive. Where diverse cultures become the catalyst for empathy and understanding.
Now we're in an abandoned hospital.
Where adventure can lead to memories.
Blow, cockroach!
The opportunity to join my friends and travel through Spain and Portugal has transformed my life. Our experiences in what felt like another world opened all of our eyes to embracing diversity, to approaching the world's beauty, and to realizing that history doesn't just exist on paper textbooks, but it exists through real stories, cultures, and people.
It's such an awesome video.
It is, yeah.
That's amazing. So yeah, it does, doesn't it? I know.
Very professional.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. And the 13-minute or 11-minute one is even more, I mean, I
Yeah,
love watching
they're all
that
pretty
one.
good.
Is that your voice narrating?
No, so Levi, who edited that video together, he couldn't be here, but he was gonna try and make it.
Yeah. So last year, of course, we went to Spain and Portugal, obviously, and we had 39 students who went, and it was an amazing trip. And I think a lot of us hold a special place in our heart about it. And I sent the video to Kira's dad.
Oh.
He hadn't seen it. Kira Duffy was with us on the trip last year. So I think a lot of the students this year really, you know, it was a special trip, and it's special to kind of have these moments to save with us too. So anyway, so that was last year. And I wanted these guys to be able to tell you just in whatever words they wanted to what their experience was like. You saw the video, but I thought they could give you just a little firsthand student account of whatever they want to say.
So I think learning a second language, just other than English or their primary language, is really valuable. I, for one, speak Spanish, and going to Spain and actually speaking it with native speakers just gives a whole nother perspective to just learning pure grammar in the classroom, and I think it's really valuable to do that. Another thing that I really liked, in the video, I like shook a pastor's hand or something, and I got a picture with him, and it was really fun. And I think the free time that we get on these trips that they trust us with is really important, and it's kind of crucial to the development of the scholars who go there to any country.
We were in Spain for Santa Semana the week before Easter, so every single place we were, they had these processions, and they were just elaborate processions, and none of us had ever seen anything like that before. It was wild. So.
I was going to say that really touches on the culture there. And something that Levi brought up in his commentary was that you don't see this stuff in the textbooks. And I think that was an amazing connection that we got there. Because obviously we spend a full semester learning about AP European history. But when you're actually there, it's a totally different experience. And it's so amazing seeing just the architecture and the buildings and the culture, the rich culture that is there, and the community around it, and how everyone cares so deeply about it. It's honestly pretty refreshing to be there, and it's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it always smells like really good food everywhere you go.
Food is very important on our trips.
Yep.
Absolutely. I couldn't even count how many gelatos you guys.
Yeah, a lot of cheese and bread. And
that up halfway through.
things.
Have to have a whole budget for gelato. Yeah.
A lot of paella, too.
And we really forge different sorts of relationships between staff and students too. When you're together 24/7 and you're going through the trials and tribulations of travel. It's not always easy, and it's not always smooth. I got stuck at the airport in Dallas on the way back from China, and we were late, and they let the whole first part of the line go, and then they stopped with me, and it was me and 28 of my students got stuck overnight in the airport in Dallas, and we had to sleep on cots in a room in the airport. And the kids were like, "It's a slumber party, we're gonna play cards, it's gonna be awesome." And needless to say, I didn't sleep because I was so nervous, but it's still, you know, you have to kind of go with the flow. I remember on a train, an overnight train in China, and the next morning, they have a row of sinks, and we're standing at the sinks, and I'm standing next to my student Ethan. We're brushing our teeth, and I looked at him and I said, "We have a whole different kind of relationship now." It's just different, you know. We see each other in our pajamas, and yeah. Anyway, okay, if you could go to the next slide, that would be awesome. Okay, and the next one after that, thank you. Okay, so this is just thrown together. It's my ideas of how to make travel more accessible. I want it to be accessible for any student who wants to go, and that was what I was really stressing the other night at the meeting about the Ghana trip, because the Ghana trip is expensive. I'm not gonna lie, it's, you know, over $6,000. Any European travel is over $4,000 now. But the Ghana trip is expensive. Plane tickets to Africa are expensive. But I wanted to talk with parents and families and students about how can we make this be so? And we've been brainstorming with parents and with other teachers who are facilitating travel. We had a parent the other night who started a 501c3 organization to help fund the band it's like a booster club thing for the band tours. And we're like, let's do that for other trips in the school. I already signed us up to volunteer at Twins games because I had a student who told us her skating club does that, and they make $12,000. It's like, okay, we can sell concessions at Twins games. Why not? You know, and try to defray the cost of these trips for families so that we can have more students go. I have seen students, I just had a dad tell me the other night, he and his student used the fundraising page on our Explorica page because they have fundraising pages. They customized it. The mom sent it out on Facebook. His trip was paid for in a matter of a couple days. Just people throwing 25, 50, all of a sudden his trip was paid for. We've had students do special offertories at their church on Sunday where, you know, this kid gets up and says something and they pass around the dish and the trip is paid for. We've had kids bag groceries at Cub. We've had parents set up, you know, we've kind of done it in a ragtag sort of fashion or a patchwork fashion in the past. I'd like to do something better than that. And I know I met with Dr. Lightfoot and Ms. Ballard and I met a couple weeks ago and we looked again at the student or the fundraising parameters for the district. And I think they used to be different because I remember being told in the past when, like my very first trip, that teachers couldn't be involved on certain levels with the fundraising, but I read through it a bunch of times and it doesn't look like that now. So I would love to, you know, even if I'm flipping pancakes for a pancake breakfast, I don't care, anything to make this be reachable for more students, I really want to do. So.
I think that, you know, going to Europe comes with a cost, but Explorica, the travel company, you know, you're just packed up with things to do. One day you're in Spain, the next day you're in Portugal, and you go through all these different cities, and it's just bang, 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 event to event, but it gives you a really rich experience of everything that part of Europe has to offer. So it is worth it.
Yeah, and with these trips, it's funny, I do take my husband as my emotional support animal on these trips. And he's a really good sport.
I like it.
Yeah.
I started taking him on the first trip, and I had, you know, he got the whole background check and everything, but I took him on the first trip because the only other chaperones I had were female, and I thought we needed a male presence on the trip as well. And he's kind of stuck with it ever since, and I kind of have to build him up every year and say, come on, honey, it's like taking vacation with 39 of other people's teenagers. It'll be awesome. But he's a really good sport, and he's good on these trips. But it really is, I say it's like a smorgasbord. It's like, you know, we go to all these places, and there's so much packed in. Like this year, seriously, London, Paris, Florence, Rome in 8 days. And it's like you get little nibbles of everything, and then you decide where you want to go back to. Like my husband and I cannot wait to go back to Portugal. We fell in love with Portugal last year. So that's how I look at these
And I
trips
think
the
it
same
is
way.
valuable for kids who are going to college after high school and they want to study abroad, and having that prior experience can help them make the best decision.
Yeah.
I'll probably end up going back to Spain. I'm going to the U, I think, here, the Carlson School of Management, and so I'll probably go to Spain because traveling abroad is mandatory there, so that'll be fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for being here and talking about this. I'm just keeping an eye on our time and want to make sure we can get through our packed schedules. So wondering
Absolutely.
if there's any more information for us.
Can I just flip it to the last slide that talks about the Ghana trip, because I know people wanted to hear about that trip. This slide and the next. Our trip to Ghana is custom planned by me and our tour company. I told them places I wanted to go and things I wanted to see. I had heard about the Kokorobite Institute. Read that article, it's awesome, it's in Vogue. There's also a YouTube video. A woman set up this institute especially for students to come and study, like environmental sustainability and clothing and art and design, and it's so cool. I knew I wanted to go there. I knew I wanted it to be a mix between kind of hard history. We're talking the west coast of Africa. You know, we're going to see Elmina and the other slave castles. I mean, hard history, But also, we're doing a community service project in Elmina to kind of give back to that community. So this trip is going to be a cool blend of history and culture and art, and just like the AP African American Studies class is, it's not just history, it's art, it's music, it's all sorts of stuff. This trip, I think, is going to exactly mirror that class and what we're learning in that class. So I'm really excited about it. And if you can go one more, it's just our itinerary. We spend time in the city, we spend time in the country, we spend time at the Kokorbaiti Institute, we spend time on the beach, we spend time at Elmina, we do 2 service projects. It's just an action-packed trip, and I'm unbelievably excited. And those are all pictures of things we're going to do. So we get to see a rainforest from up above. That's the Institute on the right. We get to go to the beach one day, and that's Elmina Castle down on the bottom right. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
I'm so excited. It has been on my bucket list of places to go for the last 35 years. And I remember talking to my drum teacher like 35 years ago, and he went and he said, it was life-changing. And I said, I wish I went with you. I can't wait to go. And here I am 35 years later, finally going. So.
That was one question I had. I know it's in conjunction with the class that you're teaching, which is new to Hopkins, and wondering why Ghana?
Ghana, because first of all, West Africa, the very first thing we learn about in AP African American Studies is we start in West Africa, and we talk about the splendor of the civilizations and the richness of the cultures, and the richest man in the world ever was West African. And then we skip over to East Africa a little bit, but we really, really ground ourselves in the cultures of West Africa. And because so many people here of African descent descended from people from West Africa, that I think that's a really important place to go. And also, I think it's important to see the richness of the culture today, but also learn about the tragic history of the past and kind of what's been done since then to kind of bridge that. So that's why I chose, one of the many reasons I chose Ghana.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
There's also just a really robust travel infrastructure in Ghana. It's a place where lots of different universities study abroad. There are these cultural and educational centers, universities. So I've led study abroad programs in Africa before, and Ghana is just, it's relatively easy to plan and lead a trip there, and it's safe. It's really safe. So.
Yes, I love it. I traveled abroad in Ghana when I went to Mankato, and all those things that you just showed, I did, like the castle, the
Seriously?
the rainforest. I did all 4 of those things, and so very life-changing, and I'm very excited that you have the passion to take the students, and thank you for the work that you're doing to curate a cultural experience for students, because I do think it's very important, and it's in line with Vision 2031 to ensure that our students are well-traveled, so.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll have to talk with you before we go.
Please.
I'd love that.
Please do, yes.
Ms. Heimlich, I'd also like to thank you for helping to create a foundation for student worldwide travel for our scholars. Thank you very much for all of your efforts over the years. And Rushi, thank you for thinking about this in a more systematized fashion. Really appreciate all of you and what you presented tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we will.
Can we use our professional development funds to go?
It looks like partial.
We will now move on to our IB program update. If you would like to come up to the table, that would be great. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen, and welcome to Jen Poncelat and Angela Wilcox, our International Baccalaureate coordinators at each of our middle schools. Thanks very much for being here and for putting together some information for our board members. So I think You'll be providing a little bit of context around what is IB. We do have new board members at our table, and then having us understand the self-study component of the evaluation experience. So thank you, and go ahead.
Thank you so much for having us. And I know that we have a slideshow or some. Oh, okay. Yes. So Angela will share that with you. Yeah. I think we are on we got our tech mixed up, so excuse us. So what you'll see is today, as you heard, Angela and I are going to give you a quick overview of IB. We're also going to talk about the connection to the Hopkins vision. So much of what we've heard tonight fits in so well with IB and what we've been doing in the middle schools. We're going to give some background timeline of IB and Hopkins, and then discuss the self-study. So before we get going, I know that we have some people here who know a little bit more about IB, so I want to do something I do with students, and it's called Fist to Five, a little pre-test, if you don't mind indulging me for a second. If you could show me what you think your kind of knowledge of the International Baccalaureate is. 5, you'll show me 5 if you feel like you could lead this session, you know everything there is to know about IB, you've got it. Fist is you've just heard those 2 letters together today for the first time. And then, of course, 2 or 3 are in between. So Fist, I have a very low understanding of IB. 5, very high understanding. So let's see what you know, if you could show me right now. Fist to 5. Okay. Okay, that's really good information for me. Thank you.
They're going to be a test now.
No, but that just means I'll go a little quicker on the background. Because, and so are you able to see the PDF that was sent ahead of time or no?
It's linked. It's linked in our board pack.
Okay, there we go. Oh, right, thank you. Perfect. Would you go to the next slide, please? All right, so as you all know, IB is an international, worldwide system of schools dedicated to developing knowledgeable, caring young people who want to make a positive change in the world. It's been around since the 1960s. It started in Europe. There are over 5,700 IB schools in the world. There are about 1,200 in the U.S. and about 80 here in Minnesota, many here in the Twin Cities area. And that graphic that you have on the right really shows, kind of wraps up all the things about IB in the middle years program. The middle years program, which is what our middle schools are, started in the mid-1990s. And where the high school program, the DP program, was kind of separate, a school within a school, the middle years program is access for all. So all of our students at North and West are IB students. And so we're going to get into like some of the parts of IB as we keep going. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. One of the things that I love about this graphic and about IB, and then as you look at the Hopkins Learning Framework, the student is in the center of both of those. When we think about the IB learner profile or the IB framework, we start with the IB learner profile traits, and those are 10 things that we want our students to be, like communicators. We want them to be thinkers. We want them to be risk takers. And so those 10 things kind of focus on who we want our students to be. And then as we think about the other parts of the Hopkins of the Hopkins framework, we think of like spaces and places, and we think of global context with IB. The authentic assessment, the authentic making connections between what students are learning in the class and then the outside world. One thing about IB is we go deep instead of going broad. And so what we want is for students, it's so wonderful that the students were able to travel. And I got a little like, when they said, oh, you know, it wasn't like the textbook felt surface. And so with IB, we want to go deeper. right? And not just hit the surface. Go beyond content to those big concepts, to that inquiry-driven instruction where students are really learning how to be thinkers and change makers. And then on the next slide, you can see a little bit more about those learner profile traits. And as we think about the traits of Hopkins scholars, and I know those are brought up already this evening, so it's fresh in our brains, but those learner profile traits, those are all the things that we want our students to be, and we can see so many connections between those and what, as Hopkins educators, we want our students to be too.
On the next slide, this slide comes from work we did several years ago as part of our Vision 2031 Imagining. There was a student success metrics subcommittee that met K-12, pre-K-12, including community members and parents that identified, we did a lot of research and we identified the current state of grading in the Hopkins district, and then we also, based on that research, identified the ideal future state. Partly driven by the mandates of International Baccalaureate, we are accountable to the IB. You can't just put the IB label on your school and say, we're an IB school, and market yourselves without actually doing the work, because they check on you. And so, driven by that, we had to figure out how are we going to change the way we think about feedback and feedback about learning and engaging students and giving them ownership of their own learning. And as we implemented IB scoring in the middle years program, we realized like we were hitting almost every single one of those ideal states of success metrics that our district had identified. And the only one that we couldn't check off was the 8 through 21 cohesive framework of metrics, because we're only one little piece in the middle years program. So we're hoping we'll get there district-wide. If you look on the next slide, it gives you a quick snapshot of what it is that we are scoring students based on, right? So we have 8 required subject areas in the middle years program, and each one has identified 4 core competencies or sets of skills that a student needs to understand from that field of study. For the most part, if you look across the top, you'll see that the first criterion, A, in almost every subject area is about investigating, learning, getting the vocabulary, acquiring the knowledge of the subject area. Criterion B is about now diving deeper and doing research and making connections and planning. So now you're starting to do something with that knowledge you've acquired. Criterion C is now when you're creating. So you're putting things together. You're producing a piece of writing or a piece of music or a performance or building something with your hands. So you're actually doing something. And then criterion D is about reflecting, evaluating, analyzing, applying that learning. So understanding, I learned, I connected it, I built something, did it work? Did it make sense? Is this what I wanted it to be? How would I change it next time? Scores are based on the level of competency that students are able to demonstrate. So they're very, very explicit. So if you look at the next slide, you can see that IB is set up from 1 to 8, rather than like defining perfection and then showing where you fall short. It's assets-based, so it defines what you know and can do at each level of learning, and it starts at a beginner because that's where you should start. And then you can see what is added at each level as you become more, move toward mastery. Those descriptors help teachers, parents, and students understand what it means when you get a grade or a score. So if you get a 5, here's exactly what you can do. Now, one of the things that a lot of people push back on, because almost all of us grew up and raised kids in systems that score kids with A through F and points and percents. It's what we're familiar with. Our brains have read that as objective and accurate scoring, and this feels squishy and like, I don't know what this is. We cut the numbers off of the left side and handed those descriptors out to seasoned teachers what letter grade would you give this description of work? Every descriptor had at least 2 and sometimes 3 different letter grades that people would ascribe to that descriptor. There's nothing to check it against. There's no agreed upon definition of what an A means, what a B means, what a C means. There's no agreed upon description of what a 69% means. There are internationally normed descriptors of IB scores. So we are working still to make sure that when we give students work and we evaluate that work, we're also giving an accurate description of what they know and can do. And then also, hey, keep looking. What do you need to add to this to move up to the higher band? And I'm teaching 6th grade this year, and our 6th graders are already able to say, I say, what do you think this is? Well, I think I have a 4. What would you need to add to it to move up to mastery? I got to add detail here, and I think I could add a connection here. Absolutely. So they're already starting to understand the language and what the scores mean.
If you could go to the next slide, thank you. So we have been IB schools for quite a while, and so we thought in this context, it would be good to hear a little bit about the history and why the middle level schools kind of are the start of IB in our district. Back in 2012, our middle levels did a rigor study, and we were looking for ways to raise the rigor and the challenge for all of our students. Through that study, the board, we explored lots of different frameworks, and the board recommended that we explore IB as a framework. 3 years later, we became, the IB authorized us as IB candidate schools, as world schools. So we were candidates, and then after 3 years of candidacy, we became officially IB. So we went through this process of kind of mentorship by the IB, and then that started our first evaluation cycle. So with IB, we're constantly looking to improve. We kind of measure ourselves on similar rubrics as we measure our students, our scholars on. And so throughout that 5 years between 2015 and 2020, what we really looked at was our ways of teaching and learning. So we focused on our curriculum, where we needed to move from focusing a lot on content to really getting into those concepts and learning as teachers about what that means. Some of our teachers were, over the course of a year, our science classes were teaching 12 units. They made that down to like 4 units, not necessarily with a lot less content, but attaching that content to concepts so that it would be more transferable. So that was a big part of that kind of 5-year segment. In 2020, we had our first evaluation visit. So as Angela said, the IB, they send people out to check on you. And so we send them lots of information, our units and that type of thing. But then we had in January of 2020, our first IB visit. So we had teams come to see both of our schools, and they gave us a number of commendations. Our teachers, as we know, are fantastic, right? Our school leadership and the district leadership got a really high commendation. Our communication, our facilities, our collaborative planning, our schedule, and our learning experiences. We also got some recommendations. And the big one was in our reporting of IB scores. And at that time, we already knew that we were going to be, that we had bought in on IB scoring. We had had a number of sessions with the school board, and so we knew we were moving to IB scoring. And so that has been our big kind of transition in this last 5-year period, is moving to IB scoring. And as we've done that, what we've found is that's changed the way we've taught as well and deepened our understanding of what it means to be concept-based. What is formative? How do we just measure learning and not behavior? And how do we measure that growth in learning? So our next evaluation visit is in January of 2025, and both schools are evaluated in the same week. And so as the governing board of us, then they'll have some outreach to you, and there are some things that we'd like you to weigh in on as we do our self-study process, which is this year.
So if you go to the next slide, just a little bit about the process. So school communities self-evaluate their implementation and their plans. IB is very responsive. So the work that we're doing in HILT and our BUILT teams, we just kind of show the work we're already doing to improve our implementation of concept-based inquiry-driven learning at our sites, and they will accept any evidence that we can show them. But we're slowing down. They give us a lot of a framework to look at, and we slow down and check ourselves. It's a 2-year process, this self-study work. What are we doing? How does it align with our district vision and mission? Is it working? What evidence do we have that it's working? What should our next steps be to continue our process of implementation? So we're in that year 1 of the 2-year self-study right now. If you could go to the next slide. The stakeholders in this work. So there is this level, our district IDL, we actually started meeting with in the fall. We've had a couple of meetings with IDL and had them going through that self-study document. And we'll meet with you all again in the fall when we actually do the self-study work, show you some questions and have you give us feedback. We are also doing it in our building with our building instructional leadership teams, with our departments, with our teaching teams. And then there will be feedback we get from students and families as well. And we've met with our heads of school just as a team of IB coordinator and head of school to do some deeper work. And then we try to make sure that all lines up with Vision 2031 and our building instructional goals. And so it all flows together. And the next slide shows you, this is the IB, this is a visualization of the IB principles and practices. So the IB philosophy in the school context, and then the 4 core areas that IB has us self-evaluate on. So the thing that we're measuring is our purpose, our environment, our school culture, and our learning. And so those are the pieces, you'll be, as a school board, looking at specific questions about those 4 areas of our IB teaching and learning, and helping us self-evaluate what do we need to do next to keep growing in our implementation.
So on the next slide, you can see we just included a couple of things that show you the way that we will be self-assessing. So for example, the IB has standards and practices under each of those 4 areas, and we'll have you self-assess on things that focus on leadership and on vision. For example, there is a practice that the school develops a mission, vision, and strategy that reflect the IB mission and philosophy. So if you could go to the next slide. The IB also tells us how to assess. So we'll assess, or you will assess us, we'll assess ourselves. And thinking about there's not a perfection to meet. We know that we are constantly going to be adjusting and making changes based on our context. But we'll rate ourselves as developing, developed, or highly developed. And when we come to that time, we'll give you these definitions and kind of discuss, well, what would that mean? And then if you could go to the next slide. We'll also provide context that you might need to make a good decision. For example, if you don't have the IB mission statement memorized, even those of you who said 5 at the beginning, we'll provide that for you, and then also our mission statements. So then you could look at those things and make a judgment on where you think we are. Those of you who were here when we did this about 5 years ago, we had kind of Post-it notes and we went around the room so that it kept us moving a little bit, which these meetings can get a little long, right? We've been doing, right? So that getting up, I noticed people were really excited to get up and see the robot, and I'm like, we're not that exciting, but we could do Post-it notes, or we could do a pear deck or something like that. So yeah, so that's what we'll have coming up in the fall. And so to get even more context for it, We would love, love, love for you to stop by our schools at any time. We will email you with kind of a list of dates coming up, but a great thing to see in the spring will be we have our community projects that students, our 8th graders, have been working on and will be working on. So at West, we have an action night. It's actually an action afternoon on April 12th when students who are doing their capstone community project, if they want to take any action, have tournaments or that type of thing, then they can do those, and then we'll have presentations as well. And then I know at North.
Yeah, so we'll also have those, that IB Community Project is our capstone of our MYP. We also have an inaugural 6th grade interdisciplinary unit around our solar ovens. So it's going to be design individuals and societies, which is like social studies. Math and science are all going to be working together as kids do a solar oven project. And I think we're hoping to put together a solar oven day where kids are cooking things out in the sun and kind of showcasing the work that they've done across disciplines. So we'll keep you abreast of any of those upcoming dates, but also just come, like I teach 6th grade design, come hang out and see what we're doing in our design wing someday, because that is really a showcase spot in our buildings of kind of what makes an IB school look and feel different. Design is an unusual class to teach for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And boy, are we queuing up well for those robotics teams.
Oh my gosh, so much. All that thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much.
So we'll be back sometime in either September or October to do the hands-on interactive conversations about our implementation of IB. But do you have any questions for us tonight?
Chair Andreessen, I do have a question. So when you come back, I think it would be useful to maybe show us, like on student outcomes, like, hey, 8 or 9 or 10 13 years ago or whenever, we were at this baseline for certain things for inquiry or being knowledgeable and caring, and then, they were at a certain level, and then now they're here, or there. I think I need that context to be able to evaluate you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Anyone else?
It's so exciting to think about where we were 5 years ago and where we are now. And I remember participating in that first evaluation process and would love to participate in it again. Now that I'm the parent of a middle schooler who is actively experiencing IB, it's like I have this whole new lived experience of it. I was super on board intellectually and as an educator before, and now like having my kid hop in the car and give me a mini lecture on the history of Buddhism the other day, I was like, this is amazing. So yeah, so really just so proud of this work and so grateful for both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming and being here. I appreciate it. I too remember that process 5 years ago and would love to be involved again. I do have a question though, because we've had some exciting development in our elementary spaces around the PYP program. And I'm wondering, as middle school coordinators, do you see a difference in those kiddos who are coming in from those elementary schools?
I think it's at this point, with such a transition this year.
Right,
with our
that
6th
was
and
the
7th
other
grade.
piece, yeah.
Yeah, but we're really excited, and we're working closely with those coordinators and talking about, all right, how does that look going from a PYP to an MYP? And so we're really excited. It's interesting, even having 6th graders in the building, it feels like they are they're open, right? They're like very high energy compared to just, some that they're open and they're like excited about it. And so a lot of that, it's hard to tell if that's just 6th grade or if that's also that shift that we're seeing with the PYP. Yeah.
And the only PYP kids we get at North are Junto scholars. Everybody else goes to West. But I can say that both in our Juntos Scholars, and then we have the Isla Charter School that feeds our Juntos program is also a PYP. So we've had those kids coming for 10 years. And teachers can say, after 3 weeks, I can name every kid who went to Juntos just based on the quality of questions they're able to ask. Like the way that they can pick up new information and ask questions is discernibly just different. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we'll expand the PYP in our district so we can get some more at
Great
North.
program.
Yeah.
Right. Tia, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I know you all see me yawning. I swear it's just me adjusting to the time difference. So hard. You're not boring at all. Okay.
We're not taking it personally.
Okay, oh my God. Daylight savings. We all lost an hour. So.
Not a fan.
Just a really, really quick question. I know this month is thinkers. Like at my son's school, they have like thinker, like posters and things up. Is there anything that we could is there any information or like activities that we could do around like our kids being thinkers? Like, is there something that we can maybe post that? I don't know if like every school does like thinkers or if every school does like a different theme, but.
What school does your son go to?
So he goes to Gatewood.
Yeah.
So like, is there like an activity?
Yeah, that poster that you saw.
Yeah.
Looks like, yes.
So is there like activities that we could post at the schools? Kind of just like a little, grab like a little, something that we can read or like activities that we can do to encourage them to be thinkers.
Do you mean at home, like parents at home?
Kind of like an at-home, like flyer or something that just has like thinker, like IB activities that we can do.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Would be a great connection piece.
Yeah, I noticed, we recently surveyed parents about, we did a whole mid-year in-progress scoring, and so we surveyed our staff, our students, and our parents. And one of the things that came up several times is kind of like, they miss having a little flyer, like having a little, like, something in hand. People kind of want that a little bit. So it's interesting that you say that, because like sometimes I think, we're missing just having something concrete and having something that they could have like little ideas on how can I help my kid improve as being a thinker, right? Not just like getting all the points, but to grow that ability to ask questions. That's a great idea. We'll think about it.
And Director Roper, be sure to check out the weekly newsletters from our elementary principals. Our literacy and math specialists are putting little blurbs in the newsletters around literacy and math and what students are learning in school, but also how to help your kid with this particular skill at home.
Yeah.
So be sure to check that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think another real strength of IB is normalizing this, both the concepts and the language around formative and summative. So like hear my kid and their friends talking about like, oh, we got a summative coming up, like we got it. I'm like, okay, it just sounds hilarious, but also wonderful, right? Like that, that's how we learn. That's how we integrate information, and having this scale of grading, helping them understand where they are in that process. And like something I kept hearing at conferences was like, it's great that you're at a 5. It's great that you're at a 5.6 right now at this time in the year, and that like that growth mindset is really baked into everything. I think it's setting them up really well for certainly what they're going to experience in post-secondary contexts, and just as lifelong learners, that we have to keep trying and getting feedback before we're able to show mastery. So
one of the
structure.
most common conversations I have with parents who call to say, why can't you just give my child an A? Like, can we go back to letter grades? And I talk a little bit about it, and eventually almost every single parent says, oh, that's actually how I'm evaluated at work.
Yes.
And I say, would you want to get letter grades at work and points and percents? Oh my God, no. I'm like, then why do you think your children do? We're teaching them how to tackle a new project, and it's okay if you don't understand it at first, ask questions, and ideally we're sending people out into the world to solve real world problems through their workplaces and otherwise, who know how to think about helpful feedback.
Yes.
So,
that's great.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now we'll move on to our quick budget update.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Andreessen. We do have our Director of Business Services approaching the table here, and just want to frame a little bit, and then Mr. Chapanduka will provide some additional context. However, we do want to share with our board members and broader audience that many districts across the state of Minnesota are experiencing a difficult time right now, facing, at least in the metro area, in aggregate, a shortfall of more than $300 million amongst more than 41 districts surveyed. And so districts and the leaders and principals and staff within our spaces do need to look at what can be done to reach those reduction targets. And there is a perfect storm of factors that are contributing to this scenario. I'm sure Mr. Chapanduka will review those items, but they do include significantly increased costs across a number of areas, staffing shortages that are costly to fill, salary increases really across all employee groups across the state that exceed increases from the legislature, and then of course mandates that are costly to implement. So we are in a bit of a pickle here, and we've been working hard to try to be thoughtful about identifying potential reductions that protect core instruction and classroom teachers. But I think our board members do understand that with 83 to 85% of the budget being comprised of salaries and benefits, then it is hard to reach reductions without impacting people. So we're trying to be very thoughtful and strategic, and also think about the long-term benefits from this. So Tara, I'll just let you take over. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Period. Good evening, Board Chair Andreessen, respective board members. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll try to be as quick as possible. And I did put together a small slide deck, and some of the information, you probably already know it, and some of it might be new. I also want to make sure that I'm intentional with new board members. Since some of our timelines, certain things happened before the new board members came on board. One of the things I tried to emphasize around budgeting time, especially this budget, which is very critical in terms of the shortfall between our revenue and expenditures, and what we are trying to do as a system in terms of making sure that we are sustainable, not just in the short term, but in the long run. So we are guiding ourselves through some foundational beliefs that our budget is a moral document that reflects the organization's values. So one of the things we are doing, working collaboratively with our building leaders and their staff, is to make sure that our classrooms and our schools matter, and they matter the most. And we are supporting building administrators so that they can support educators who can support our students. Therefore, the majority of our allocations, about 95% for those board members who probably have not been part of our previous budget processes, about 95% of our allocations go into buildings, either directly or through district-wide allocations, which directly impact our buildings, our programs, and our education system. Natalie, can you go to the next slide, please? I also want to start from a timeline perspective. so that the board understand where we are at this point in time. I know we'll probably come back with more information at the next board meeting. And our budget process honestly starts when the board approves and adopts the next year budget. We start planning for the following year. So between July and December, there are a couple of things we do in the business office, cabinet, and leaders around information required by the Department of Education, which lead us into the board certifying the property tax levy in December. In January, we sit down with our building leaders and our department leaders. We provide a preliminary enrollment projection, which actually drives how revenues and allocations will be distributed into our system. And in February, and you all experienced it on February 21st, when the Citizen Financial Advisory Committee came to the board and presented their recommendations. And those recommendations are what guide us to start putting the budget together, obviously putting into consideration some of the information we are getting from the state in terms of any inflationary increases, or some of the information we are capturing from the market in terms of consumer price index. And that also culminates into a resolution recommending staff reductions, which kind of drives some of the work we are doing now. And then in March, starting with this meeting, we give a high-level overview of where we are, and then we start getting into more details in terms of reduction, if we are anticipating any reductions. And then in April, we come back to the board with the preliminary structurally balanced budget for the following year, in this case, fiscal year 25. And then the board approves or disapproves that preliminary budget. If the board approves it, then we work further with building leaders to make sure that we are tying out those budget centers. And then in May, we come back to the board with the first board read of the budget. And then in June, we'll have the board adopt the budget. And according to statute, the budget has to be adopted by June 30th. And then in July, we start our new fiscal year. Natalie, can you go to the next one? Thank you. So, and I know we've kind of shared some of this information here in terms of some of the pressures we are facing with our budget, is alluded by the superintendent. One, declining enrollment, and we are fortunate at Hopkins that our enrollment is flat, so we are not gaining, we are not losing. And I know as we start to look across different school districts, there are some which are actually very impactful in terms of declining enrollment. Our enrollment has been flat. We also have the pressure around contract negotiations, as has been presented previously by Dr. Lightfoot in terms of some of the either tentative agreements or some of the agreements we've reached out with different bargaining groups. We also have the pressure of funding formula. When you start to look at the cost of living adjustment and then the inflationary increases we are getting from the state, it's always skewed. And it does give a lot of pressure to school system. And then you start to look at compounding of any basic revenue, which has been coming to school districts over time. There is a huge gap, over $1,300, to get us to where we can say our revenues and our expenditures are structurally aligned to be able to provide the quality service we need for our students. The other component is the loss of the one-time funding we've been getting from the federal government. And at Hopkins, we were very intentional with some of those resources. So we'll tap into any resources we're able to intentionally capture and save to be able to at least reduce the pressure we know we are facing through some of these elements which are outside of our control. So the end of the ESSA allocations, which should be finalized by September 30th of 2024, definitely will take away some resources we've been using in the last couple of years to lessen some of the pressure. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so as you may remember, on February 21st, the CFA group gave recommendations to the board. We know that the state had given the district 2%, I mean, all school districts 2% in fiscal year 25, and about 4% in fiscal year 24. And then there is language in the legislative mandates which talks about a potential 2% inflation, 1 to 2% inflationary increase going into the future. The recommendation also presented that enrollment was going to be flat. We also factored in a 5% cost of living adjustment in fiscal year 25 for total salaries and wages. We kept our fringe benefits flat based on some of the market analysis we've done. So our fringe benefits will still remain flat at 42% for fiscal year 25, and then we'll review as we go into the next budget. We also factored in a 5% consumer price index increase for purchase services, utilities, transportation, supplies. I know there's been an uptick in transportation costs, so that's one area we are trying to navigate by looking for efficiencies so that we don't impact our quality service. As presented, we also care about a 12% fund balance, unassigned fund balance. So we'll try by all means to lessen the gap we are facing here by tapping into some of those funds. Can you go to the next slide, Natalia? One of the tools we've used in the last couple of years, and I want to make sure that the board understands, with our predictable staffing model, which is a resource allocation tool we have leveraged to allocate resources into our buildings. And it starts with a base allocation, mostly around staffing based on formulas or ranges we've created over time, and sometimes we've also tweaked those ranges. And what it ends up leading to is it leads to any remaining dollars which are not allocated using that base allocation being distributed into the buildings based on each building's enrollment projections. And those projections are revised over time as we move into the beginning of the school year, because when we do the projection, we are making some assumptions. And then when we start to see the actual number of students coming in, sometimes there might be some increases or decreases. We always put some resources on the side to be able to address that. What the predictable staffing model is not, it's not a tool which is outside of our control. We did develop the predictable staffing model, and we created those ranges based on the programs we provide. Therefore, it is a tool which is controlled by the district. which can be tweaked depending with how resources are being aligned. It is also not a tool that dictates how adults within a school should be deployed. We deploy the resources, the building leaders and their staff determine, based on priorities in their spaces, what's best for the school. The predictable staffing model is also not a tool that we should blame for resource scarcity. It does deploy resources based on what we have coming into the district. And then from there, we just have to be very intentional, strategic around how we are leveraging those resources to meet our different needs based on the programs being offered, as well as any other needs within a building or a department. One of the things we've done, can you go to the next slide, Natalia? One of the things we've done in order to at least leverage some of the resources is to relook and transform and realign some of our categorical revenues. So we do have some title resources we are trying to leverage. Okay. We are trying to leverage around, title, compensatory, or achievement and integration. And as we go deeper into the numbers, we'll provide more information to the board. Can you go to slide number 11? So this slide actually just show some of the work we've done so far. So we made some adjustments. Initially, we had shown our deficit at 3.8. We did make some adjustments to our predictable staffing model so that more resources are available to buildings, which actually increased that gap to about 4.4. So far, we've identified about $3.5 million in potential reductions across different programs, mostly at district-wide level. And we are still working on identifying the remaining $900,000. We'll be back to the board in the next couple of weeks with more details around what those reductions look like, around maybe reclassifying some of our expenditures, reducing personnel, consolidating positions, realigning certain expenditures, reducing maybe certain expenses we've incurred maybe at the district level around printing, or reduction in our purchase card purchasing of supplies. So there's a number of things we are doing, which we are trying to solidify and end up reducing the remaining $900,000, and then allocate resources to our buildings as well as our departments. I know there's only 3 minutes left, so I'll stop there. I apologize, I went a little bit too far.
You didn't have enough time. Okay.
No, you didn't. Thank you so much for this information. And what I would like to offer to members at the board, we do have this presentation linked, and we can review it. And if you have more detailed or further questions for Director Chapanduka, please do reach out to Dr. Mary Perry Reed or myself. Perhaps we can answer those questions. And I would like to thank you again for this. I know it was last minute putting this together for us, and I really appreciate your time. And I know it's a very busy time right now for everyone, but especially you, working through all of these different scenarios and what could and couldn't work for the district. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I would like to propose that we have about 5 minutes of a break for everyone to kind of get resettled, refreshed, and we will meet back here at 7:05. started. Or run. We'll just have a moment here while we I'm going to go ahead and start this meeting of the Hopkins School Board for March 12th, 2024 at 7:06 p.m. Our first, I would like to call to order the meeting. Our first agenda item is public comment. We have two public comment sections in the Hopkins School Board because we believe that hearing from our community members is crucial to implementing Vision 2031. If you wish to contact the school board via email instead of publicly commenting at a meeting, please use our schoolboard@hopkinsschools.org email. We do take public comment in two forms. You can leave a voicemail, and that number for doing so is on our school board page. Or you can come here and join us in person and fill out a public comment card located at the back of the room and hand it to the board chair before the meeting begins. I did not receive any meeting public comment cards, and did we receive any voicemails to be played this evening? No, we did not receive any voicemails, so there are no public comments for this board meeting, either at the beginning, which is for items on the agenda, or at the end of our meeting, which is for items not on the agenda. That means we get to move to our favorite part of our board meetings, unless there's robots involved. Our student board representatives report, and it looks like we have 3 board reps here tonight, and I'm not sure if we have any joining us virtually, but I'm sure they will pipe up if that is the case.
Just notice they're sitting on the cool side of the table.
Is that what we're calling it? Well, welcome, and who's going to go first tonight? Great, thank you.
Hello, my name is Manuel Wahyu. I'm the freshman student board representative. Last week, I think it was last week, we had the Hopkins High School College Fair, which had hundreds of colleges, and it included a bingo game that incentivized students to go around interacting with different universities and colleges for a chance to receive a gift card. Also, in sports, the boys Nordic ski team, with all the winter sports wrapping up, the boys Nordic ski team placed 3rd at state, the boys alpine ski team finished 5th at state, and the boys swim and dive team placed 20th at state, and they broke 2 school records in the 200 freestyle relay and the 50 freestyle. The varsity boys basketball team is having their section finals game right now against Wayzata, and the varsity girls basketball team is headed to state tomorrow, playing against White Bear Lake. Also, the dance team placed 8th in jazz and 9th in kick at the state meet last week, and this is the first time they have been to state in Hopkins High School history. As you all may know, the band from Costa Rica just went home, and they sent our high school a very nice letter. I'll read it all for you. Dear families and staff of Hopkins High School, I hope this message finds you well. I am writing to you on behalf of all the members of the Cedes Don Bosco Band to express our deepest gratitude for the warm welcome and hospitality you extended to us during our recent cultural exchange in Minnesota. The opportunity to live with you, share daily experiences, and explore the cultural richness of Minnesota has been an immensely enriching experience for our musicians and staff. Every moment spent together, from casual conversations to joint activities, has significantly contributed to strengthening the bonds of friendship and understanding between our communities. We especially want to thank the host families for opening your homes and hearts to us. Your generosity and kindness have left an indelible mark on us. Likewise, we extend our thanks to the staff and students of Hopkins High School for your warm welcome and for facilitating such a stimulating learning and collaboration environment. This cultural exchange has not only allowed our musicians and staff to immerse themselves in a new culture, but has also fostered a deep respect and appreciation for the differences and similarities that unite us as global communities. Hoping that this experience has been as rewarding for you as it has been for us, we look forward to the possibility of future collaborations and the reuniting of our paths. Please accept our deepest thanks and best wishes from the entire family of the Ceres Don Bosco Band. May this cultural exchange mark the beginning of a long-lasting friendship between our institutions. With gratitude, Banda Ceres Don Bosco. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing
And
that.
then-
I feel like I've done something wrong here. Okay. My name is Amina Tizak, and I'm the 10th grade virtual EDU representative, not just Hopkins High School. Currently at Hopkins Virtual EDU, we have quite a few things going on. We're working on an elective class called Let's Build a Library, where secondary students are able to volunteer to help organize and build our school library. We've picked a location, set up shelving, and we're working on tagging and organizing all the books. It's a year-long program where we learn project management and development skills, and earn credits and volunteer hours. We also have a new functional fitness space at our Hopkins East building, which everyone is really excited about. It was actually founded by HEF, the Hopkins Educational Foundation, funded, not founded. They also provided us with a grant for a peaceful pathway. The work hasn't been done yet, but we intend to landscape the front area and create a walking path with benches and positive messages, which will be used for restorative conversations, leisurely walks, and just about anything else you can think of. Everyone in the community will be invited to use the space, and I think that's really amazing personally. I think that it's going to be great to have like a community space that's outside where we can just chill and enjoy our peaceful pathway. We've also got a couple upcoming events, including a meetup where students are encouraged to come in person for some scheduled community building group activities. A field trip where we're going to be packing food at Feed My Starving Children, and a family cultural night where families will be encouraged to bring in food, games, and activities from their culture. I have a question. Did you want us to mention the policies that you asked for our input on in the board report?
Sure, and we can talk about them during the meeting too.
Okay, so I wasn't entirely sure what you were looking for when you asked us for our opinion on the language, but I did notice one or two grammatical or technical errors.
Oh, great.
Did you want me to tell you those?
That might be
Or
better.
should I
put
email
in,
them somewhere?
Yeah, in
or-
an email to
Okay.
our chair of the policy committee.
Okay, and then other than that, it seemed good to me.
Wonderful.
That's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. My name is Praise. I'm a junior board representative at Hopkins High School. Yeah. Okay. A junior at Hopkins High School, also one of my teammates, Sydney Drevelo, competed in the Junior Olympics in South Korea for cross-country skiing, which was very cool. There's also been new access for nutritional facts for school meals at our school. This is kind of connected to health science, and it's also helpful for scholars with specific dietary needs. And recently, the HHS newsletter, which has been running weekly, I believe, featured a scholar spotlight. It's been helping to create a culture where we celebrate and acknowledge students for their efforts. Also recently, we had our PSEO, which stands for Post-Secondary Education Opportunities, I believe. And we had our information meeting, and so many students were engaged and interested in the opportunity to earn college credit for free while still getting high school credits. The College and Career Center was packed with people, making it so that the door couldn't even close. Also, for National Honor Society, which is an organization founded on community service, they have begun accepting applications for current juniors for next year. This morning, actually, sophomore scholars in biology took their science MCAs, and spring sports like softball and track and field started their highly anticipated first days of practice yesterday. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. The weather has allowed for many of these spring sports to take advantage of their various outdoor facilities, whereas in contrast of previous years, many of these sports spent their first few weeks of the season indoor in the old gym, Royals Athletic Center /RAC, and/or in the middle school structure. And just to also give some remarks from a track and field athlete's perspective, I can definitely say that me and my teammates enjoyed the first time being able to run out on a track instead of on a space that's usually ends up a little bit stuffy with all the people that come on the first day. And so speaking of new people, in addition to all the positives of our grade level switches, freshman students from the previous North Junior High / West Junior High have transitioned to the high school, which has allowed for more efficiency since now all of our high school sports students are in one place. The post-start culinary students have been practicing diligently, and their competition is 2 days from now. They have gotten the chance to work with a professional chef to sharpen their skills. They've been preparing lamb chops, which I've gotten to taste, and they're very, very good, as well as scallops, desserts, and many more things. Gary Hines, music director and producer of the 3-time Grammy Award-winning group Sounds of Blackness, worked with our American Sign Language classes recently. Scholars learned new signs to support music that were performed at the Royally Speaking, our annual tribute to Black history. Also, diverging a little, our HOSA blood drive, we received $500 in scholarship funds from Memorial Blood Centers for our seniors. And then additionally, recently, we also had health partners come and visit us. We had some health professionals from the St. Louis Park West End Clinic. And so they brought their clinic manager, nursing supervisor, a radiology technologist, and a family medicine medical doctor. Health partners, in turn, was impressed by our brand new CNA room, which was where the event was hosted, and they were excited to be a part of an event that helped promote future health careers. The Six musical made history for the Hopkins School District and the Hopkins Royals Productions. I had attended with Mia, our other school board junior representative, after she encouraged me to multiple times. We have become the first school in the state to bring this wonderful musical to the high school level. It is currently on Broadway and touring in Toronto. Bringing me to tears at some point, the musical featured a narrative-like performance of each of King Henry VIII's 6 wives, tying in themes of femininity and women empowerment. And it's Women's History Month. Okay, our Hopkins High School girls did so well, it was truly awe-inspiring. At the end, they even invited the audience to join in and truly experience the art of theater. After reviewing the original, I even shared with my sister that I believed our Hopkins girls were honestly on the same level or even surpassed that of the original. And next up, they're having their Robin Hood production, so be sure not to miss it. Wow. Amazing. And that's all I have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And do we have anyone joining us on the virtual meeting? No.
Unfortunately, we don't. Sorry.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive update, board reports. This is amazing. Were they coordinated? I feel like
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Getting a really good feel for what's happening.
Gives us a full picture.
Yeah. Are there any comments or questions from board colleagues?
I do have a question, Chair Andreessen. I know that there are some basketball games, so did we win?
They're playing right now, actually.
Is it championship right now?
It's the section finals for the boys right now. And then girls play White Bear Lake, which they hopefully will win, definitely, tomorrow.
The boys are in Wayzata right now, and then girls play tomorrow, and some students are going to that, correct?
Yes, they're leaving during the school day, and it'll be at the U of M Williams Arena.
Exciting.
It is exciting. And I've heard great things about that musical, so I'm glad that you gave an update on it. I did not know that we were making history, but I did hear it was excellent and amazing.
Making history in lots of ways.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for those updates. We appreciate you making time, being here, and having such comprehensive reports for us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed for our superintendent report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Andreessen. Well, last week was an interesting week for our schools. We had 3 days off for elementary students, closed on Tuesday for the primary, and then parent-teacher conferences Thursday and Friday, and then secondary students were out on Thursday for conferences. So hopefully we had lots of parents and caregivers in our schools getting quality feedback about how their students are doing. And now we're back to normal with a 5-day school week. This photo is from State Representative Cheryl Joachim's newsletter. A few of us, including student board reps Manuel and Mia, our Legislative Action Coalition, Director Roper, and Chair Andreessen all converged on the Capitol last week to advocate for Hopkins and for public schools. As mentioned during our workshop budget update a few minutes earlier, Minnesota districts are undergoing budget reductions and preparing for the spring staffing process. Metro area districts are facing a combined budget shortfall of more than $317 million for the 24-25 school year. And because teaching and learning is our core function, here in Hopkins, we're really working as diligently as possible to do everything we can to protect classroom teachers, core instruction, and the resources that help our schools run successfully. At the same time, it's very difficult identifying $3.8 million in budget reductions. So we're doing our best, and we will prepare another budget update for the March 26th school board meeting. If you're listening now and you missed the workshop budget update, be sure to find it on our school board webpage. You can also refer to the staff and family budget updates sent via email this afternoon. And that being said, there are still always fabulous things happening in Hopkins, so let's take a peek. On February 23, Virtual EDU hosted a project-based learning showcase. This event provided students with an opportunity to highlight projects that they created through a comprehensive exploration of topics closely aligned with content presented by their virtual EDU teachers, aka learning facilitators. Next Thursday, Hopkins will drop a new Inside Hopkins podcast featuring Minnesota's premier online academy. That is Virtual EDU, of course. On February 27, Meadowbrook and Gatewood celebrated Black History Month with a special visit from Golden Valley Mayor Rosalind Harmon and Hopkins School Board member Brooke Roper. Mayor Rosalind is the first Black mayor to represent Golden Valley, the city where Meadowbrook Elementary is located. Students and their principals hosted a mock swearing-in at each of the schools where students emceed and also read their own poems. It was a really special experience to see our girls and our students of color see themselves in the elected officials who now serve them. First graders at Gatewood, and we have some Gatewood educators in our in-person audience. Thanks for being here, ladies. Recently visited the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. They explored birds and how their beaks are especially adapted to their food and habitats. Students also went bird watching, learned about tools that help identify birds, and became wildlife scene investigators by looking at evidence animals leave behind, like feed markings and scat, to determine what happened in a given area. They also explored animal movement and tracks and different gait patterns of animals. As a partner as Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge is a partner organization to Hopkins schools, and therefore we do get to take advantage of their wonderful lessons and supplies for student learning. So thanks to that organization. On February 23rd, first graders at Alice Smith celebrated the 100th day of school, which is a long-held tradition at Alice Smith Elementary. For this year's celebration, students made 100th day trail mix. Each first grader was given a sorting mat and 10 bowls containing different snack ingredients like goldfish, Teddy Grahams, pretzels, M&Ms. I wonder how much of that was eaten before they engaged in the counting activity, but students had to practice their counting and one-to-one correspondence by counting ingredients and then putting into groups of 10. And then they organized 100 items in baggies, attaching a 100th day tag to complete their fun snack. Maybe there were 76 items in each bag. That same week, Tanglin hosted a very successful literacy night. The 292 people in attendance far exceeded expectations. This was true community in action, with families being able to learn all kinds of important information about what students are learning in school. All students received swag bags and books, and parents and grandparents and other caregivers expressed gratitude for a wonderful evening. North Middle School Spanish students culminated a unit of learning about foods and restaurants with a trip to Boca Chica. Boca Chica is a traditional Mexican restaurant that serves authentic food and has not only been visited by the fantastic scholars of Hopkins North Middle School, but also by President John F. Kennedy. 65 students attended the field trip. The cost of the buses and meals per student was $30, and financial aid was offered, but no one used it. And we're always interested, just like Mrs. Heimlich was presenting at the board table earlier during the workshop, how to make outside of school experiences accessible to students. We're always interested in the data points around how many students attend these various experiences and what any barriers are for students who might not be able to attend. Door decorating was a recent fun activity at West Middle School. Students put their hearts into decorating doors for Black History Month. Students and staff received specific requirements, and judges announced winners at the end of the month. And the winners were Mr. Simpson, Ms. Filippo, and in first place, Mr. Spreitzer, as well as their respective students. Congratulations to sixth graders and their coaches, Miss Lacey and Mr. Dowden, who represented West Middle School at the sixth grade Math Masters of Minnesota competition. These students competed against teams from the greater metropolitan area in a demonstration of competency in math facts, as well as 3 individual problem-solving rounds, a tiebreaker round, and 3 team problem-solving rounds. The Math Masters Mathematics Competition Program challenges 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students to use critical thinking and problem-solving skills in mathematics, and we're really excited to have our Hopkins students involved. As spring approaches, just like our student board reps mentioned, all of our seniors are planning for their futures. So you heard about the opportunity to explore post-secondary options at the Hopkins High School College Fair, and you can see a number of the institutions that were represented on each side of the slide. And so we want to thank Dr. Kuhl for organizing the event. Thank you, Principal Ballard, for promoting the importance of college and career preparedness for all of our students, and gratitude to all of the institutions who showed up to share information about their programs, their campuses, scholarships, the admissions process, and much more. Also, AVID students also hosted a college fair showcasing HBCUs, or historically black colleges and universities, which are sometimes absent from the traditional college fair due to geographical limitations. Principal Ballard or student board reps, do you know if any HBCUs were at the other college fair? No? Okay. So the AVID Scholars presentations highlighted alumni achievement, academic programs, and scholarships. And HBCUs provide culturally affirming environments, supportive communities, and specialized resources that empower our students of color, primarily black students, to excel academically and professionally. On February 29, the annually Royally Speaking Showcase celebrated culture and talent, as previously referenced by our student board reps. This year's theme was Conversations on the Stoop, featuring powerful spoken word, dance routines, songs, and presentations. So many thanks to all of the scholars and staff. I heard Mr. Nash sing. Wow, amazing. So staff also showcased their talents, and thanks to the extraordinary Miss Onika Miller for organizing, and thanks to COBADS for sponsoring. The candidates for this year's Minnesota Teacher of the Year honor has been narrowed to 27 semifinalists, with 4 of these teachers Hopkins teachers. So wow, congratulations and good luck to Sarah Gleason, who teaches at Meadowbrook, Laura Jensen, who teaches at North Middle School, Dong Hong Wang in our Chinese immersion at Eisenhower Elementary, and Ellen Wu, who teaches at Alice Smith. We don't know who the Teacher of the Year will be, but with Hopkins having more teachers than any other district, the odds are looking quite royal. I didn't write that. Who wrote that? Did you? Oh. Did you, Jolene? Somebody smart wrote that. That was pretty good. And also, our principal, Eduardo Navidad, is being recognized by the Minnesota Elementary School Principals Association. We call it MESP for short. And this is the Division Leadership Achievement Award for the West Suburban Division. Principals are recognized when they promote a positive school culture, provide instructional guidance, and ensure overall school success. Congratulations to Principal Navidad. And then the final slide here, wanted to highlight and truly thank our Hopkins Education Foundation, who do such an outstanding job supporting Hopkins schools, teacher innovation, and student learning. On Saturday, March 2nd, HEF had the 2024 Royal Bash, and it was a wild success. The high school's Jazz 1 combo performed. Kim Campbell, who is an academic dean at West Middle School, was our MC, and she did a great job. And guests, almost 400 guests, were visited by 2 llamas. 2 llamas walking through this venue at the Metropolitan off of 394. It was pretty interesting and crazy and adorable. The theme for the evening was Fueling Future Minds, which is focused on bringing computer science, coding, and AI learning into Hopkins schools. Think technocrats. And so again, we sincerely thank HEF for all that they do for our schools, with an extra thank you to Jen Cameron for organizing, and Executive Director Emily Wallace Jackson for ensuring everything happened the way that it was supposed to. And that's it for my report.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Well, thank you so much for that comprehensive update. I think it's really nice to see all the great things going on, and I will just mention that I got to attend the event at Gatewood, and it was really impactful, I think, for our students to see themselves reflected in leadership in the community. So wonderful things happening at Hopkins. With that, I will move on to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Our agenda is approved for this evening. And we will move on to the consent agenda. These are items that provide the board with information considered to be more routine in nature. If anyone on the board wants to pull an item for additional discussion, a motion can be made. The recommendation is that we approve the consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent calendar is passed. And that will bring us to our treasurer's report. As you all can see, our treasurer, Rachel Hartland, is not here with us. She is traveling and doing some of that very important international travel that we were talking about earlier this evening. So in lieu of her being here to provide her report, we will, of course, have reviewed it beforehand, and I will make her motion for her. So we move that Rachel Hartland, having met with Torero Chapanduca, Director of Business Services, and reviewed the district bills, that we approve the financial disbursements in the amount of $3,484,069.53 for the period of February 14th, 2024 through March 6th, 2024.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a second, a first and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the treasurer's report has been approved and passed by the board. We have no unfinished business, and so that takes us to our first order of new business, which is a resolution of concurrence in 2024 for the American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, APAC. And I'm excited for this next piece of business on our agenda, and I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Puri Reed.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. I would like to welcome Andrea or Annie Pfau, who is our American Indian Program Coordinator, and also JoJo Battles, who is here for moral support. Annie's sidekick. Yes. So, and then just a quick framing that districts that report an American Indian student count of 20 or more to MDE are eligible to participate in the American Indian Education Aid Program. And so we use those, MDE uses the student counts to determine funding, and we're really happy with your work. Annie, I know you have a partner, Deb Andreen, who also is working alongside to ensure that our students feel seen and validated and see themselves as scholars. And I also appreciate all of the family and staff events that you're hosting and facilitating across our space. So I'll just turn it over to you so you can explain to our board members what a resolution of concurrence means and anything else that you'd like to share.
Absolutely. Anin Jawanijigu Ikwe Ikwe, Indigenous cause, Annie Pfau, Indigu. And what I said was my name is Southern Sky Woman in Ojibwe, and it's Annie Pfau is my English name. And one of the things that we try to get our students to practice so much is our languages, because they're being lost at a scary level. So we're going to practice that ourselves. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Buju, Jojo, Indigenous cause, Minawa, Gakabikang, and Donjiba, Makwan, Nin Dondam, Naga, Jiwanangda, Ishkuninganing. So I said, hi, my name is Jojo. I'm from Minneapolis. The Bear is my clan, and Fond du Lac is the name of my reservation.
And so Joanna is our chairperson of our APAC, so our American Indian Advisory Committee. One of the things that I wanted to just quickly outline for members here tonight and anyone watching online that may be new or not familiar with our program is just some of our basic programming and what we do. And so just on our first slide here, we are trying to meet biweekly with all Native American identifying students within the district at each of our school sites. And in addition to that, we're providing cultural and traditional teachings, basic language skills, crafting, book clubs, building community, and helping to identify what it means to be a modern Native American. Not everyone in our program looks like what the books say we look like. Here in Hopkins, we have Native American students that identify from many cultures within our district. We have students that represent themselves as Black and Native, as Asian and Native, as white presenting, that come from bilingual families and that come from second generation immigrant families. So truly, our students are from all walks, and I think that even when we have staff drop in and kind of take a look into our rooms and say, oh, what's this group, who's meeting here today? And we can say this is Native group, oftentimes people will say, I would not have guessed that. And it's really just helping to build community of those kids that are so different maybe in appearance from one another, but still have that tie and that connection to one another, and just helping to build that. Can we go to the next slide? So just in a nutshell, because we have more than 150 students in our district that identify as Native American, we get a base award of $40,000 per year, plus an additional $500 per student in addition to any student over 20. So we have a pretty healthy budget to work with when it comes to looking at cultural and traditional teachings and providing students with academic support and with helping to just push them in being the best scholars that they can be. And with that, we have to abide by our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, which ultimately has the power to say what our funds get used for and what they don't. There are rules as far as that on a statutory level, and if anybody really wants to hear all of those rules, I can tell them to you. I like the legalities of things, and I can spew statute all day long. It's a bad habit, but nobody wants to hear it tonight. But that is something that if you want to learn more about, I can absolutely help you with that and get people up to speed on that. But what it comes down to is our parents and our guardians have a say in how our program operates. And with that, they have to look at the legalities and make sure that we are performing to a level that they think is acceptable. It's not just a thumbs up, you know, everyone's having a good time and really, you know, we like everybody, so we're gonna vote for you guys this year. They actually have a really comprehensive rubric that they have to follow that gives them multiple guidelines that must be met. And regardless of if those guidelines are met or not, if the parent committee feels that efforts are being made in progress to those guidelines, that's what can help to sway their vote. And so that is what we're here presenting on tonight, is that our vote is due each year by March 1st to MDE, and that vote has been completed. If I can get to that in just one moment, if we can go to the next slide, I just want to give an example of some of our cultural and traditional teaching nights. On the left, you'll have a photograph of some of our students that were visiting the Native College Fair this year at the Minnesota History Center. And again, even looking at our students that were present on that day, I think it really shows just the array of students that we have that are in our program. Again, we're not just serving anyone that can identify or fits a mold for what I think historically this program has really reached out to. And so, and then on the right is, you know, an even more colorful picture of a representation of people that are coming to our events. I think at the beginning of last year, when we were really trying to push some of our family nights and activities and bringing traditional teachings to the district as a whole, there were some events where we'd have a handful of people here, or Ms. Battles and myself would be here hoping that people would show up and we'd have some food, and it'd be our kids kind of playing and we'd be teaching them, and they'd roll their eyes at us, and they, but they were good sports about it. But this year, I think we've really seen support. You'll see some administrators from around the district in that photo. You'll see people from all of our sites, and people that are coming together to learn more about their history. We've had multiple staff members reach out and say that, they didn't feel Native enough, but now that they've come to some of these things, they're really taking a look at their own heritage and learning more about themselves. And because maybe they were white presenting or black presenting, that they didn't know that they should identify themselves as Native. And we can do that here, especially with Minnesota's standards and how Minnesota defines Native American. You don't have to look a certain way or present a certain way to be included in that. And so the photo on the right is a class we had in December, and we learned from a teacher who was teaching traditional birch bark crafting. And we made simple ornaments, but even that was, a skill that many people didn't have. Tracing and cutting is hard even for adults, but we had a fun time. And with that, I'll get to our last slide, please. And on the left is the meeting minutes from our last meeting that was included in your board packets tonight, and I will just read it so that we cover ourselves on the legal basis. And it states that on Monday, February 2nd, 2024, the Hopkins American Indian Education Advisory Committee met to discuss the annual vote of concurrence or non-concurrence. Members present included Joanna Battles, Toya Stewart-Downey, Jennifer Mauricio, Paula Kostman, Rosalind Lee, and Andrea Fau. It says project director, that's what the state calls me. For our purposes, I'm the Indian Ed coordinator. The annual compliance overview and district and school self-assessment rubric provided by the Minnesota Department of Education were both presented to the committee and all members prior to the meeting. All members of the APAC were invited to attend the meeting, which was held virtually after a majority vote about meeting preferences. Members present held discussion on the state of the American Indian Education Program at Hopkins Public Schools, and a vote of concurrence for school year 22-23 was discussed, as were previous votes of non-concurrence. The committee reviewed the issues voiced on the non-concurrence votes of school year 21-22 and reviewed the issues voiced in that non-concurrence vote and the district's response. The committee also viewed school year's vote of 22-23, which was viewed as a year of building after the previous year's vote, and they were pleased with the growth of the program. The committee is prepared to vote concurrence for school year 23-24 as another year of growing and building for the program. At this time, the APAC does not have any asks or anything that they wanted to present further in writing to the board. They're just hoping that we can continue to function as is, and we'll keep trying to build the program and hopefully seeing the growth that we've experienced this year. I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right. Any
Wonderful.
questions?
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
That's
Chair
a
Andreessen.
wonderful feeling to have that report.
Well, and we've enjoyed seeing people that have come out, and I know you've come and played games with us and been able to experience some of our family nights, and just know that we're going to continue to keep offering that open to anyone that wants to come and check us out.
Fun, good food too.
Yep, lots of Always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Achievement.
So we do have an action item as a board, and it is recommended that we accept the Hopkins American Indian Parent Advisory Committee vote of concurrence.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion?
Chair Andreessen, I was curious, and maybe the opportunity's passed, but that's fine. Is there anything we know about like why it was non-concurrent in previous years? Like what the reasons for that was?
Would you like to?
Do you have the history, Andrea? I know that at one point, the committee and parents were concerned about the staffing model.
Yep.
And I don't remember what the other components were.
So the last year in recent history that there was a vote of non-concurrence was 21-22 school year. And part of the reasoning for that was that there wasn't enough dedicated staff in APAC's mind for programming to be reaching all the students that it needed to reach. There was staff that was working towards the program that has now been split into 2 positions, which made room for more face-to-face student contact and more in-depth kind of teachings and time. And so one of the asks that year was that there be a second dedicated staff member. They wanted the staff members to be representative of the community. And one of I think the third ask that year was that there be licensed positions. And even though that component had not been met, the APAC was happy with the hiring of a second position and with the staff being representative of the community. And last year, that's when they decided that with the growth that they'd had from the 21-22 school year, that they would move forward with voting concurrence. As far as the 20 and 21 school year, I would have to look back into notes, but I don't remember what the recommendations were for that.
I appreciate the color around it. Thank you.
Yeah, is there any further discussion? No, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Annie.
Okay, discussion is over. And I would then like to call a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes, and we've accepted the concurrence vote from our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee. We will then move on to policies in first read. So I will turn it over to Vice Chair Ross.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. Yes, we're going to be welcoming Dr. Nick Lightfoot. In review, we're going to be looking at 4 policies. These are going to be the Bullying Prohibition District Code 514, District Code 522, Title IX, Non-Discrimination Policy, Grievance, Procedure, and Process. And then we're going to also be looking at 859, the Electronic Data Security. And then the last one we're going to be reviewing is, let me just find it. Acceptable Electronic Resources 524. So I know these policies have come in front of us to review as a board, and as a reminder to our constituents, we're going to be using the rubric of the Innovation Equity Lens policy. What this is going to encompass is how does this policy impact our core values and mission, who benefits, whose voices are needed, what needs to this change, and then how the policy will be monitored. I'm sorry, what needs to change, and then how will the policy be monitored. So I will hand it over to Dr. Lightfoot.
Good evening. Thank you. Good to be with you all. In particular, the policies that we are looking at this evening have been identified. Policy 514 is the first in that listing of what the monitoring committee has gone through. The bullying prohibition policy did have some statutory changes in the last session, legislative session, that were outlined within the policy and the model MSBA policy. You do see those reflected here in the changes, specifically in the language that's been identified with 514. What I would do at this point, if there are specific questions or other comments from monitoring committee members, would open it at this time for further questions or comment. All right. Seeing none, policy 522 is Title IX non-discrimination policy, mandated policy that we have related to the non-discrimination, Title IX. And in particular, in the review, as this is an annual review policy, I believe, in part, the work that we had done did reflect that we would not be recommending changes at this point. Any comments, questions regarding policy 522?
Doesn't look like it.
All right. Policy 524 is the acceptable electronic resources use. There were some specific items that were identified here in the model MSBA policy that the monitoring committee did go through. Some of those are related to cell phone use. And in particular, we did go through the model language, made some adjustments to that language that we thought were more reflective for the environment that we're looking to create in Hopkins, and did make those changes in policy 524. Again, if there are other monitoring committee members who would wish to make any comments or any questions, available for those related to 524 at this time.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes, Director Thompson.
So regarding the cell phone use in particular, can you kind of give us a picture of what this looks like in practice for a kid who has a cell phone at school?
Sure. So in particular, related to specific behaviors, or how would you see that potentially reflected with the policy?
I guess my question is, in number 2, students who use an electronic communication device during the school day so during the school day, does that mean you can't use the device during the school day? I don't know. That's how I initially read it, so I wanted to ask what it actually means.
Excellent point. That's exactly what the monitoring committee wrestled with. The model language in the MSBA policy had 3 sections. The first section that we really struggled with was students are prohibited from using cell phones and other electronic communication devices during the instructional day. And we thought that level of policy and direction was actually not conducive to the learning environment and the use that we promote of the positive use for learning of the technologies that we have in place. So what we did is we dropped that section 1 and then kept the other 2 items. In part, what the recommended language was for in the policy is to identify the reasonable suspicion threshold that is required for an individual to even begin a possible search at its inception. So with section 2, what it established was if there is a reasonable suspicion of a violation, it really then affords the individual who would be managing that set of circumstances the ability to possibly search the device, but that would need to be reasonably related in the scope of the circumstances in anything that would be justifying a search. That was number 2 specifically. In number 3 is you identify students who use the device during the school day and or in violation may be subject to disciplinary action pursuant to the school district's discipline policy. What this does is it identifies that if there were reasonable suspicion, if there were a use that would violate policy, this would then give us, according to this policy, the ability to move forward with some disciplinary component or a search if necessary. But there would, number 1, need to be a violation, and number 2, need to be reasonable suspicion. And those are significant thresholds. Does that help?
It helps a lot. I didn't entirely realize that it's number 1 followed by number 2. So I get that explanation. I'm just curious for those on the monitoring committee or Dr. Lightfoot, has there been any thought, like I feel like I've seen in news articles about, a district said no cell phones during the day or something like that. Was there discussion or thought about taking this further to go to that point or not?
I think there was there was a level of review to kind of identify like what are other neighboring and other districts across the metro doing, and there was nothing that was kind of saying you cannot have a cell phone. I think the closest or I wouldn't say neighboring, but the closest district was Robbinsdale that had, like St. Paul didn't have anything, which I was probably surprised of knowing that's a bigger district. But then Robbinsdale basically said for testing purposes that you couldn't use your cell phone. And so that's what it ultimately came down to, is that you couldn't use it, but they were the only ones who kind of specified during testing, cell phones are not permitted, and they had that language embedded in their policies. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the policy they had, but it was basically one of their policies that communicated no cell phone use at all during testing, so you couldn't even bring it in to that particular classroom site. Let me know if anybody else feel like there was something else that I missed or.
I think it might be helpful too to talk about functionally, what this policy does, because it's a district level policy. So this would not preclude individual buildings and individual school communities from putting in place their own guidelines around cell phone use, right? So this is a policy statement that would encompass the entire district. And then, for example, perhaps the West Middle School community would say, hey, we really want to limit cell phone use to passing time. That's going to be the practice in our building, right? So this policy is in place for, again, kind of those, and I see this as a complementary policy to the bullying policy, especially the piece that you're talking about, Director Thompson, and that threshold that Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot talked about. So I don't know if that's helpful, and you can please correct me if my read was not accurate.
No, both very, very well done. And that was, I think, part of the dialogue that we had as we looked at this section, because this section was all new in kind of the creation of the MSBA work that was done with this policy based on last legislative session, in bringing in some of the cyberbullying aspects and times that may be necessary, but also as well recognizing the instructional use of it and some, good practices around how we keep information safe and secure.
Chair Andreessen, can I ask a question?
Can I just add one comment? Director Thompson, if I might add, philosophically, in our district, we have tended toward helping our students acquire the self-regulation skills and the self-monitoring skills that are needed so that they can abide by the school's rules, rather than an approach that would, prohibit cell phone use from bell to bell at all of our schools, sort of regardless of what an individual school community wanted to do. And I think, I wasn't here when we introduced the one-to-one model, but I think it also complements our a district where we have a one-to-one model. Every student has their own device, and we're really trying to cultivate digital and technology literacy and responsible use and things like that. So I think there's also a philosophy behind our current approach, if that helps just with history.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Good. Director Roper, I just wanted to follow up on the connection you made between this policy and the bullying policy, if I may. Is that all right? I was wondering if there was discussion around that and if there could be some, because I see them as very much connected, and we all know a lot of bullying, unfortunately, now students are able to do it with their cell phones, and it can happen on school grounds or anywhere. So I'm wondering if there was any discussion around tweaking the language so that this applies to violations of other school district policies, because in section 2, it just lists our discipline policy, which I would say should be referenced by its name of student code of conduct. But I would also like to see it incorporated by other policies, like the bullying policy or our, inclusion policies or anything along those lines.
So the bullying policy, we're back at 514 now. In section 2 in the general statement of policy, it references use of electronic technology and communication. So it's like the bullying policy speaks to the electronic use policy, but I see your point, to close that loop, right, to refer back to it. So that makes sense, and I think that's easy enough to do.
Or to make the language more inclusive of our policies as opposed to just the code of conduct policy.
Well, I think in particular, as you're identifying part of what we're looking to do is to narrowly pull together the connections between the two. When would it rise to such a level that we would feel that we'd have reasonable suspicion where we would need to go to something like looking at a cell phone or searching it? And that threshold is high. It's also outlined particularly in the bullying prohibition as a general protection, simply because cell phones are viewed as personal extensions of people. And as such, a search of that device is very invasive. And so it needs to be regulated in some respects at a higher level because of all the information that's contained in that device. And so as part of it, the direct connection between the bullying prohibition in item 2, as was identified, directly mentions the electronic technology and the communication on the school premises during the school function in those particular components so that it can tie back to 524 and why we possibly would have reasonable suspicion. It's also a protection for our staff that would possibly be involved in this as well. And a good educational component of when something like this might actually occur. Does that help in kind of drawing the two together?
Yeah, and I was wondering if there was a way to do that more in the language of the policy, or are we feeling like it's not necessary?
I feel like for the school district's discipline policy, I mean, we could definitely have that updated to specifically say students' code of conduct. I'm assuming calling that out, that makes a ton of sense. I know for this cell phone policy, just this section caused a lot of anxiety, and that was hence a lot of the hemming and hawing, because I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself as, like, I have a child in school, and if they needed something, I would want them to be able to reach out to me, but I don't want them to be playing Fortnite. They should be learning. So, I mean, it's trying to use somewhat of a common sense and not being like, this is the day and age that we live in, like taking any electronic device out of a school setting is just unrealistic post-COVID at this point.
Right.
But asking your scholar to be focusing on education and not be distracting, that is where we're trying to lean, because it's, how do you balance of, I know probably the average parent wants to have cell phones pulled out of the school. I imagine maybe some staff, but then obviously you have another subset of parents, and most likely 90% of students want the cell phone as close as possible to be able to reach out to whoever their guardian is.
Unfortunately, the average parent texts their kids while they're in school. So we have to do a little bit of parent monitoring too. Redirecting.
As a parent, I can't confirm or deny that.
Chair Andreessen?
Yes.
Could we invite the student board reps to weigh in on this? I think they're going to be subject to it.
I did want to offer Director Roper a chance to ask your question, and then I would love to hear from the student board reps.
Thank you, Chair Andreessen. And so what I'm wondering, because I'm also on the monitoring committee, is there a way, or can we invest in a proxy or like firewalls that would prohibit students from getting on like social media like during like the school hours? I know that like at the libraries, there are certain websites that you cannot access on a computer within their Wi-Fi. And so wondering if that's something that we can invest in to mitigate the distraction of like those social media. Because when I was in school, we couldn't get on, I'm aging myself, MySpace. And we couldn't get on Black Planet in school, you know? And so, I mean, hence we had Apple computers with like the little back on it. So I know technology is far more advanced, but just wondering if that was something that we could help mitigate that.
We can, and Director Wetter could speak specifically to some of those sets of filters and kind of the parameters that are set there as far as the protocols, if we wanted to have that specifically identified for you.
Mr. Wetter, I don't know if you want to provide more detail, but he's sharing that we can easily do that on school devices, and we're not able to easily systematize that on personal devices. Is that correct?
I know it's been difficult for me on my personal device sometimes in district buildings to access social media sites. So I think it depends on whether you're on the Wi-Fi or not. Kids always have a workaround.
They do.
Yeah. We'd love to hear from our student board reps.
Chair Andreessen, also, I know Amina wanted to say something, but I just wanted to comment on your question. Yes, well, I don't know for sure all the behind the scenes of it, but whenever you connect to the Wi-Fi, the Hopkins net Wi-Fi in the high school, you're not like, Instagram doesn't load, any other social media apps don't load. What else? Yeah, and then you can give what you wanted to say, and then I also have a couple things I wanted to say as well.
So I had a question about, you mentioned that there would be like searching of personal devices. And I'm just wondering like what the threshold for that is. Like, you know, if someone says, for example, that I'm cyberbullying them, I would never do that. But if someone says that, does a teacher then have the right to search my phone to see if they can find like text messages or something like that to them?
It's a great question, and it comes with a whole bunch of answers that begin with "it depends."
Okay. Also, another question. When it comes to searching of personal devices, does that fall under like the right, do you know if it falls under like the right to refuse being searched? Like, you know, if I think that a teacher doesn't have reasonable cause to search my phone, can I be like, you don't have the right to do that, and refuse to let them search it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Geez, you should be in my school law class. It's actually under the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, and you're exactly right. Cell phones have been held to be the highest level, if you will, of that personal kind of extension of a cell phone. There's a series of cases, and that's why you see some of the language in here being added, is because earlier when I was identifying it, courts really do view it as a person. It's one thing to search property, which is viewed differently. It's another thing to search a person, and connecting the cell phone directly, as so much of people's personal information is part of their cell phone and who they are. That becomes an incredibly high threshold and should always be the last resort, and is usually only used when there's serious safety or security threats that are imminent, is probably the best threshold that I would give you. Part of the conversation is we can always ask for information voluntarily, and if people are willing to provide it, it helps. But if there's something where we may need, in a safety and security set of circumstance, to look at something, that's why you're going to see this reasonable suspicion language here in the policy. Does that help?
The ACLU has done a lot of great work on this over the past few years, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's, you know, that students don't shed their constitutional rights when they walk through the school door. And the ACLU advanced a couple of model policies, and our policy is very much in line with what they're recommending. But I'm happy to share that source too, because it's very complex, and again, it's why we chose to make that threshold very high in this policy, so that we're not, running afoul of students' constitutional rights.
Chair Andreessen, I wanted to ask a question. Who consists of the monitoring committee? Is it everyone at the table? A couple people?
It's Director Westmoreland, Vice Chair Ross, who chairs the monitoring committee, and then Director Roper.
Okay. And so then during...
Be a student board rep as well.
Okay, yeah, that's the main reason I was asking, because I know you mentioned during like the reading of each one of the policies, like going down the list, I don't remember exactly what you had said, but you mentioned the monitoring committee, so that's why I had asked that. And then just a couple of remarks about what's being discussed, specifically in section 4, I think it's 514 of the bullying policy. Where it talks about like the reporting procedure. I feel like there's a lot of, this is like general, this is not just specific to Hopkins High School, but there is a stigma about reporting bullying, specifically to school counselors or anyone in general, whether that's admin. It's kind of hard. I know, I don't know if this has been revised, I can double check, but I know it said something about reporting immediately to an appropriate school district official. If a student or like a student, whether that's like 5th grade or high school, because I know you had mentioned this goes all around to all of the schools, and it works in conjunction, I believe, with like whatever the school decides as well. I'm not sure if a student would, like if they read that policy, would feel comfortable going up to, I don't want to phrase it like this, but to an adult in a position of authority to report an instance where they felt vulnerable. I feel like those moments are often the part where students dread the most. So I don't know, well, maybe rephrasing that language a little bit about the school district official, or if maybe it could be more clear about it doesn't only have to be the school district official, it could be any trusted adult.
Or maybe some companies do like an ethics hotline that's not in the immediate chain of somebody that might be responsible. Maybe setting that, and I'm just throwing that out there, but set that up. It's anonymous-ish, right? It's not to the chain that might be the problem. Would something like that be useful for students, or?
I know we have, I saw at the bottom of the policy that was sent to us, thank you also Dan Westmoreland for inviting us to give our opinions and what we have to say about this. But I saw at the bottom there was a form kind of similar to what you had mentioned for reporting bullying. About that form, what do I want to say? I'm not really sure if students, like if that form, well, it's not really advertised to students that they have the option to do that. The process, like the reporting procedure, isn't really known very well to any student. So someone who's like experiencing like bullying, like they may not feel comfortable just going into reporting it like into the blue, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And then, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. And then additionally, I don't know if I call this section F or just a part that had the letter F. It said submission of a good faith complaint or report of bullying or other prohibited conduct will not affect the complaints or reporter's future employment, grades, work assignments, or educational work environment. I just wanted to know how this is being followed up with, if it's like the school, individual schools that create like methods, I guess, of ways that that doesn't happen, or if it's just monitoring through conversation, like following up with a person who reports an instance of bullying.
Great questions.
And then
I just wanted to quick follow up with you on the reporting piece. I know that it has been a discussion every time we review this policy, and our student advisory committee also weighed in on that, and I think, you know, different ways of anonymous reporting have been discussed, use of Google Forms and things like that, and having those very readily accessible. It's also other policies where we've talked about where, not just bullying, but, you know, harassment and those kinds of things where it is really hard. I think that your executive functioning just shuts down in those moments, and to weed through trying to find a way to report is difficult. But also that, you know, creating a culture, I think, in our school buildings where there are trusted adults that all students can go to, I think is another thing that we come back to every time we have this discussion. And perhaps there is a way to be more explicit in our policies that that is the culture in Hopkins and that that is the preferred pathway to anyone who's struggling.
And what I hear clearly is, as we look at the structures in place for creating opportunities for individuals to bring this information forward and to do so in a way that, number one, is encouraging of reporting, and number two, allows for that anonymous nature, if needed, to bring to people's attention as through bullying logs or other opportunities to really communicate the experience, that those need to be further accessible to students, and that the design in our safety and security structures really needs to have a more accessible opportunity for people to bring the information forward. So oftentimes we may have the language and policy, it then becomes, is it in its implementation happening? And what I hear is, yeah, you have some language here that feels pretty officious, like school official. Can we make it so it seems more user-friendly, audience-based, and then can we also have some structures in place that allow for not only the form, which kind of checks the box, but how do we make that more accessible and in the hands of people that are able to use it when they need it?
One idea for implementation could be at each site that students advise the building leaders on how to best share this information too. So like, does that happen during crew? Does it happen, does this information live somewhere online that's not in the policy, right? Like the reporting form and plain language around it. Because that obviously will look different at every age level too, and developmental level. So it's great, thank you.
Thank you. And one more thing I wanted to touch on about, well, I'm not sure if this is directly about the implementation of the policies, but the Hopkins High School is starting up again. Well, kind of started earlier in the year, but we're fully starting now. A peer jury led by Dr. Tate. I'm not sure if this falls within the 514 bullying policy for sure, but I wanted to bring it up because it does deal with some like the disciplinary route kind of, or the remediation route of bullying or any other instance that involves a student. So some of the things, we actually have a meeting about it tomorrow, and it includes like more discussion about the role of a jury, specifically peer jury. That would be like our peers evaluating other peers. And it would be with the county attorney's office, Mr. Willie Bridges. It also includes like the examples of issues that we'll potentially manage and how it will function, how potential consequences will be administered. I'm not sure if this would go, is there a separate policy for like the specific like school conjunction kind of things that schools create based off of the district policy? Is there?
Yeah, I think excellent question, and to the point raised earlier about the connection within the conduct, when we think about the conduct policy that we have for student conduct. And certainly those measures that you're talking about are certainly within the context of what it looks like to make the action right and how we review the action, especially in the context of a jury of our peers.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would love for that to be a workshop topic at some point. This sounds amazing and how it fits into our restorative approach, so.
Yeah. That would be great.
I think we have a future attorney at the table.
So does the monitoring committee have a clear idea of next steps for these policies?
I think some of the takeaway that I heard was in reporting procedure under Section A, making sure that the language is identifying trusted adults, looking at ways in which we can reframe some of that language to encourage reporting and stronger capacity, certainly as we make those changes. Those will be so noted. Some of the other elements are the takeaway related to the form and how we gain greater accessibility to that form, maybe not specifically in language, but definitely in implementation. And I certainly think some of the follow-up, maybe that follow-up is at that workshop element and how that may be taking shape and any other practices that are occurring that we could update the board on.
Great.
Oh, Chair Andreessen, I just have one question. Dr. Lightfoot, if we do have reasonable suspicion and we think that we need to do a search of a cell phone, just technically, you know, all these devices are encrypted now. If the student locks their device, we're kind of, you know, stuck, right? Like, what do we do then?
Yeah, in general, it becomes very difficult, but I mean, in essence, if a student were to refuse and not give a passcode or open the phone, we couldn't force it. I mean, certainly if there are different sets of circumstances where, and that's why I said it depends, there's a whole set of nuances. And sometimes things are in plain view and you don't need to search. Sometimes, yes, it is encrypted, and we'd need to make sure that we were contacting parents about the sets of circumstances that were occurring. Such would be kind of the details around the situation of when it might rise to that level. Okay. But if it were encrypted there, a student would not be in a space where we could require them to open it.
But we could infer, it's not like legal, right? It's not like a courtroom, right? We can infer things, and that's fine, right? That's, you know, if they do not consent to it, you can kind of still do the punishment, right? Is that what I'm kind of hearing as far as from a policy perspective?
Yeah, if it's not consented, then we certainly could work with other sets of circumstances or other kinds of things if we may have some other sets of details. But the other interesting thing is that you may not need to get that device because in the world of cyber connections, the information you need may not be right on that phone, but the copy of it is going to be somewhere that you already have access to.
Right.
Somebody else has the
Yeah,
receipts.
so there's a whole bunch of different ways that are less intrusive, but get the same result. And as I said, hopefully the threshold here is as high as it can be because it would only be a last result.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Andreessen.
Yes.
Just, I promise this is short. Just back on that 524, section 15, that first sentence, if the school district has a reasonable suspicion that a student has isolated a school policy, should that read violated?
Violated,
Yes.
thank you.
Good catch.
So I'm feeling that perhaps policy 514 and policy 524 maybe has some tweaks that the committee might want to meet again and talk about. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, that's fine.
So then, are we thinking that we will do a motion to approve policy 522 in first read and prepare the policies for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of the consent calendar? And then the other two will go back to the monitoring committee for revisions?
Yep, that works.
We also have 859.
Oh, we haven't gotten to that one yet.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but I'm cool with that plan.
Okay.
Now you're talking about the time.
8:59.
I know, it's just like,
And thank you for that dialogue on the other two. 859 is the electronic security policy that we were advised to put in place specifically as a high-level policy in place by, requested by auditors. So that is in essence the kind of genesis of where that came from. No recommended changes at this time.
and I'm assuming this was run by
Yeah, there's no change, so.
people who know. Yes, okay. Yes.
AKA John
Someone
Wetter.
other than me, yes. Are there any questions? Oh, that one looks good. So then any things to add to this? All right. Then I would look for a motion that the board approves policy 522 and 859 in first read. And we direct the administration to prepare those policies with any suggested revisions for approval and second reading at the next meeting as part of consent calendar.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. And then do we need to move for the the monitoring committee to review 514 and 524? Okay.
No, we'll come back and put them on unfinished business.
Okay, great. Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe you get to stay at the table with us.
Sure.
Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. Don't run away. So next on the agenda is our resolution to call executive session. But before we go to that, I would like to give everyone an opportunity to do their member reports so that we can adjourn the meeting after closed session. So I'm going to offer our board members to go around the table, introduce yourself, and then if you do have a board member report, please provide it at that time. I will start with you, Director Westmoreland.
Hi, I'm Director Jen Westmoreland, she, her, and I've been on the school board this is my 7th year on the school board. I have a scholar at West Middle School, and I do not have a board member report this evening.
Hi, I'm Jiming Zhou. I've been on the school board 3 months now. I have 2 children. They are in the Sing Sing program at Eisenhower. I think the only thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is Dr. Mary Perry Reed mentioned the HEF fundraising event, and I attended that, and it was just very inspiring to see all the people come together to support the district, and it was really good to see that community of support, and it was very inspiring.
My name is Jason Ross. This is my, 3rd year on my first term. I have 3 kids in the district. All 3 go to Tanglin Elementary. 2 of mine, this is their last year in elementary, and they move to the middle school next year. So I have 2 5th graders, and then I have my 2nd grader who will be moving to 3rd grade after the conclusion of this year. So I had the luxury last week to be able to do conferences. My 2 oldest, basically it was their last conference for their elementary year, so it'll be interesting to see what middle school is going to be like. They're both very excited. The other thing for school board reports, board member reports, is I had the luxury of attending the AMSD meeting on 3/1, where Representative Heather Edelson from Edina and then Senator Zach Duckworth from Lakeville Basically, they came to this meeting. It was virtual for some of us who weren't going to get up at 6 in the morning and go over to Little Canada, and then in person for everybody else who did make it. So maybe our superintendent was there that early in the morning at 7 for a meeting. But two of the big thing that was discussed was the READ Act 2.0, and they were discussing that legislation and moving forward. Unfortunately, Representative Edelson, she is going to be done, so that work is being passed over to whoever her next in line to take over that work. So that was very good to hear that work was going on with the READ Act. But obviously, the legislative had communicated, which has been brought up, that obviously we're not in a funding year, so it's going to be a very difficult year based on what our legislators were discussing. And then I would say just a shortfall. There was a survey that went out that school districts are facing a $300 million in shortfall. So that was probably the eye-opening thing that I realized, like, unfortunately, we have some of our friends in neighboring districts that are facing similar financial issues as well. And then also the last piece is on 3.2. I think I saw a few board members and superintendent at the HEF gala. It was a great event, and I enjoyed myself, and I definitely want to give kudos to all the work that I know Jane Cameron and some of the other board members at HEF kind of shaped and put together for that particular gala event. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Andreessen, and I have been on the board. This is my 5th year, and I have 2 delightfully quirky kids, one of which is at the high school as a sophomore, and so I got to attend parent-teacher conferences. And I should say I also work in the district at Gatewood Elementary with some of the lovely people in attendance here tonight. So parent-teacher conferences at the high school, one of the things that I was really excited about and wanted to share with the community is that my kid is taking American Sign Language, and it is taught by a native speaker, which I think is an amazing opportunity, and I would believe somewhat rare in high schools. And also the entire class is gets to then learn about deaf culture, which I think is, I would assume is something that is often missing from that particular language acquisition classes. So kudos to whoever made that happen. I also participated in the AMSD Day at the Capitol along with Superintendent Dr. Mary Perry Reed, and we got to hear some really great stuff from our legislators. We got to promote something that we think will have a big impact in Hopkins, which is flexible and really great transportation, hopefully electric, for our specialized programs for PSEO, which was mentioned by one of our students, and other career and tech offerings that we have, which usually comes down to if you have transportation or not, you get to be a part of the program. And they also, one of our legislators brought up that they're trying to get a universal screening for mental health in schools through the legislature, which we had a lot of questions about, and she had questions for us as well. So it felt very collaborative. Think it could be a great thing if we could actually get that passed and implemented into schools. So I will pass out to you. I'm done.
Oh, I've done my report. Hello, everyone. I am Brooke Roper. I am serving my first term on the board, and I have 2 children in the district, 5 and 6 years old at Gatewood Elementary. They are wonderful, wonderful kids. I had the opportunity, as with Chair Andreessen and Dr. Mary Perry Reed, to go to the Capitol last week to, talk about some very interesting and very critical issues for the district, and was able to mingle around with different, school board members in different districts. And I was invited last week to speak at Westwood Church. Thank you to Pastor Sarah and Pastor Tania Tanya for inviting me to talk about environmental justice and climate change, and was able to talk about the work that I'm doing with electric school buses and Westwood churches in St. Louis Park. So it is our neighbor district, and was able to help influence some of the members to think about their impact and how they would like to address climate change and how they want to get into the fight. So that will continue to be a focus of mine. And also today attended a very wonderful event from one of our Hopkins grads with Dr. Mary Perry Reed, Halal Ibrahim. She have a partnership now with Children's Hospital. They launched a gown, a special gown for children, and this is like the first gown in the nation of this sort. I worked on this project with Halal for about 2 years, and it was very, very, it was a very unique moment, very special. Super proud of her. Halal graduated from Hopkins High School, I think back like in 2008 or maybe 9, and she is just doing wonderful work. She is the CEO of Henna and Hijabs. And it was a very amazing event, and I'm very proud of the work that happened there. So, but yes, that's it, my board report, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Right, I'm Kai Thompson. I am the clerk on the school board. This is my first year on the school board. I have 3 kids in the district, grades 3rd through 8th, and I have no further board report this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for providing that. And now we will move on to our resolution calling an executive session. And I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to walk us through that.
Sure. The executive session is to discuss the negotiation strategy regarding the HEA, Teachers Collective Bargaining Agreement.
Thank you. It is, and I will just read it out, correct? And then Clerk Thompson, we will need a roll call vote. Is that correct? For resolution? No?
Not just for the general.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. It is hereby resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 270, Hopkins, Minnesota, meet in executive session to discuss negotiation strategy related to the HEA contract for the 2023-24 school years. That the meeting be held in person and commence immediately following adjournment of this regular meeting. Further, that it be noted that all board members, superintendent, and clerk were duly notified of intention to call this executive session.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution passes. And should I also do the second resolution? So we will be going into a second closed session for an executive session for the superintendent mid-year review. So I will also read out that resolution. It is hereby resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 270, Hopkins, Minnesota, meet in executive session to conduct the superintendent's mid-year review for the 2023-24 school year, that the meeting be held in person and commence immediately following adjournment of this regular meeting and after our other closed session. And further, that it be noted that all board members, superintendent, and clerk were duly notified of intention to call this executive session.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, resolution passes, and we will commence going into closed session at 8:45 PM. Thank you all for attending. Do I gavel?
Can we take a little break?
Yes.